young master, the primogenitor of steel, Barbados, and many others far above her in the next gradations. There were hundreds of other vassals of the master all around her as they found the blue waters all around them continued to passively flow into their existence as they reinforced it and the concepts within them. As if even if they didn't do anything, they would continue to be elevated until they eventually reached the 9th gradation of extremity. Who else but the master could do this? The scribe smiled at such a thought as she wondered, how different was it for the young master and others who were swimming in the waters of the 9th gradation of extremity? How much time would pass before they reached the endless skies? She didn't know for sure, but she knew she had to have this level of power herself in order to continue her work as the scribe of the infinite existential omniversal seed. So she also became filled with determination as she began to ascend the quintessential gradations of extremity, the white book in her hands closing as she held it tight. On the cover of the book, it read, "The quintessential fable of the existential omniversal emperor in the dazzlingly vast omniverse. Where the hell is it?" The voice of a certain Sanctus princess rang out as she continued to search atop her draconic night for something she knew was in this region to no avail. Her body was already emanating a heavy existential light that spread out all around, but she became stern as she began to spread it ever further at this moment. Unbeknownst to her, though, a dazzling cerulean vessel in the form of a ruler had crossed great distances and was arriving towards the same region she was in to search for the same thing she was seeking. Chapter 2987. Two sides clash. A dazzling vessel in the form of a blue ruler was streaking across the dark canvas of the Omniverse. A terrifying Imperium Knight Legion aboard this vessel, in addition to the Imperium Royal Basilius Observer Xavier, that had taken responsibility for the downfall of the Vitalis and Vacuous hyperversal domains. At its forefront, a woman holding a vibrant Codex of Extremity, adorned in a crimson armor laced with golden linings, could be seen. A man with a similar existential armament beside her as behind them, 10 other Imperium Knights followed her. Knight Akalusia and Knight Paulina in the lead, and 10 others following behind them. It was a lineup that would terrify most Archons of Common Legacies, as all three were on the 3rd stage of existential Dominium realm, Teleos. Beside Knight Akalusia, Knight Palmino gazed at the endless expanse they crossed as his intent moved out. Our cause is a glorious one, as we have been bred since birth to go against evil. To be sidetracked on a mission like this. Not all were content with the current mission. To chase down the weavings of a seed? A fucking seed of all of things? Not even a target of Sanctus Populi or omniversal pillagers, but something that based on the intel had possibly attained the Dominium realm on the last day. They would waste their time with this? Hearing the intent of Knight Palmino and gazing at his golden crimson hair, he looked like a shining example of an Imperium Knight with his fair skin and a gaze that seemed to be above all others. Knight Akalusia herself was of pristine beauty, with her crimson gold hair, her gold eyes sharp and filled with sharpness, as within her eyes, the same level of pride and arrogance couldn't be seen. She didn't even turn to gaze at Knight Palmino as she relayed her own intent calmly while gazing ahead. We are the sword of the Imperium. We go wherever we are aimed, and we cut down whatever opposes the Imperium. Our feelings do not matter, Knight Palmino. Blazing words of brilliance boomed out, the intent loud enough for Palmino to hear, and for the other 10 knights in the Royal Observer to hear. Knight Palmino only became colder at such a reply as at this moment, he scrutinized Knight Akalusia up and down. I follow every command as a knight of the Imperium while putting my feelings aside. When you were appointed to lead alongside me, I left my feelings out of it. But I am curious about your origins, Knight Akalusia. Which enclave do you stem from that, without any prior history, you would be appointed to lead a legion? A red legion at that, too. The words of Knight Palmino didn't continue. Knight Akalusia had raised her hand holding the dazzling Codex of Extremity, such an action causing the facial muscles on Knight Palmino to twitch in anger, as before anything could be said. They all observed Knight Akalusia to be gazing forward intently as she spoke. Feel. A single intent, but but the gazes of all those here hardened as they looked ahead. Their dominiums buzzed as they each spread out like a billowing sea, silent and deadly as within a moment. The gazes of the knights changed heavily. Far, far ahead of them, they felt a daring and blazing aura similar to theirs, an aura of the Teleo stage of existential dominium realm. And at the moment that the billowing dominiums of Knight Palmino and the others billowed out and discovered such auras, the other side also discovered them. Feeling this aura closely, the gaze of Knight Palmino became utterly cold as he bellowed out. Arms, a glimmer of brilliance, and in his hands, a dazzling golden sword, crimson shield. Absolute sharpness and absolute defense came together as behind him. The knights of this Red Legion came equipped with similar existential armaments, a combination of swords and shield, as some had dual shields or dual swords. And the moment they were equipped, Knight Palmino didn't hesitate as his figure flickered out of existence. Destroy the enemies of the Imperium. Boom! The distance was long, but for them, it was also short. A resplendent existential authority blazed on Knight Palmino as with a single step, the expanse of the Omniverse seemed to flicker beneath his feet as he disappeared, and an instant later, his visage was already in front of a massive draconic knight and a gorgeous verdant-haired woman gazing coldly above him. Enemies of the Imperium. These were the words Knight Palmino shouted out as he was very cognizant of the different auras of the enemies of the Imperium. And those ahead of them, the visage of the gorgeous woman above a draconic knight, was something common for those of the Sanctus populace. The visage of Knight Palmino blazed with existential brilliance as he arrived in front of the two entities, his eyes steeped in immense hatred and honor as his existential armament swung down. He looked into the eyes of the green-haired Sanctus princess, and the coldness they showed, along with the serpentine eyes of the dragon beneath her as he spat out as much bile as he could. Heretics! And his sword swung down. A profound purple radiance swung down with it as behind him. The existential extremity authority of royalty congealed to form a very real purple sword that seemed capable of cleaving apart any dominium of the Teleos stage with ease. This sword intending to cut down those ahead of him. The Sanctus princess was calm at such a scene, as she seemed to be looking at both Knight Palmino and the less than a dozen other knights behind her. And she then patted the dragon beneath her as his booming intent echoed out. W.I. The existential extremity authority of dignity gleamed. Above the figures of the Sanctus princess and the draconic knight, an interminably massive golden scroll manifested and unfurled, the scripture of dignity written across it as it was radiating a shocking dominion rule. A rule that stated unless you held a higher level of dignity than me, you could not cut me down. Chapter 2988, Two Sides Clash. The dazzling scroll radiated immense golden waves of existential authority, as opposing it was an extremely real purple sword carrying down its own dominion rule of royalty, that it could cut down anything opposing it, royalty and dignity. Such contrasting and similar concepts laid down their dominion rule with a heavy impact boomed out inside the glorious infinite existential omniversal seed. Noah was in the midst of quantifying the many changes and seeing the production of fruits of existence within his body when he instantly raised his head to look towards a certain direction. His eyes seemed to pierce across the veils of the infinite existential omniversal seed and see far outside it, waves of existential authority being felt far in the distance as his eyes became somber. The authority was heavy. The dominiums releasing it were heavy. The scale couldn't even be easily discerned, as even in this far distance, Noah felt that just the raw power of the impact of the dominion rules may be able to oppress his extremes. It may not mean that his existential extremity authorities were weaker than theirs, but their pure raw power contained in their dominions, having absorbed eons worth of fruits of existence and being reinforced and annealed over and over again, could simply press down and ignore the alteration of existence itself that Noah could impose with his extremes. But even while he felt this shocking authority, Noah was simply somber and not fearful. He closed his eyes and read the weavings of existence. He knew that in the endless expanse of the Omniverse, it was unlikely for him to come across entities with the waves of power that he currently felt at random. There was a high chance these entities were here for him. But for this clash to occur, they had to be of different factions. Even with the power they expressed, though, the extremity of conquest pulses with determination. The extremity of tyranny welcomed the challenge. The extremity of cheats smiles and gazes at the source of the infinite existential omniversal seed. His extremes expressed their desires. Yes, the enemies were far stronger than he was. But he wasn't alone. His strength couldn't be measured by his dominions alone. Cheats had already pointed to the path forward as Noah's main body appeared in the isolated space of the dazzling multicolored throne that was heavily bathed with mana dynamics at this moment. His eyes locked onto the manifestation of the infinite existential omniversal seed as she turned towards him with a bow. "Master, would you like to try?" Her words were calm, as if she already knew what Noah intended to do. When the strength of one's enemies was so vast, it was impossible to bridge such a gap, especially so in the existential dominion realm. But Noah had something no other beings could claim ownership to. Noah had the infinite existential omniversal seed. Among its many expanded capabilities, it still had its defensive and offensive features. In the past, Noah could wield a spear, an atlatl that carried the weight of this construct, and it was a haven for fun. Now, its boons were further expanded, as the ways Noah could borrow the power of this construct were utterly unfathomable. Noah gave a light nod towards the manifestation of the infinite existential omniversal seed as he stretched out his hands towards her.
Come.
The surroundings began to buzz with interminable existential might, as the manifestation of the infinite existential omniversal seed turned into blazing streams of light that flowed towards Noah's hand and began covering his whole body. The process of existential omniversal shrouding has begun. Shrouding. It was a unique choice of wording in comparison to armament or adornment, but it was more so inclined to protectively wrap around something, to cloth and veil an object. At this moment, Noah's visage became shrouded with the manifestation of the infinite existential omniversal seed. And with such an action, he sought to carry with him the power of the infinite existential omniversal seed itself. What did such a concept even mean? What did it signify for a being to wield the weight, records, existence, and extremes of an omniversal seed? And just how could such a thing compare to the scales of power established by the forces of the omniverse? Noah was itching to find out as his body became encapsulated by layers and layers of weavings, a radiant, multicolored armament that had pulsing linings of cerulean light being formed around him. It buzzed like a forming engine of unimaginable power, this light extending to form a resplendent spear of light in his right hand and an aegis in his left hand. His three dominiums were contained within as they felt an unfathomably heavy weight pressing down all around them. This weight lessening over time as Noah acclimated until finally, boom! Blazing blue auroras of wings expanded out behind his back as an instant later, his figure took a single step and disappeared, towards the region where a heavy clash had occurred. Purple and gold seemed to split existence itself as a single Sanctus princess mounted a draconic knight and stood opposite to an Imperium knight who pulled back his sword, the result of their dominion rules. Shockingly, showing the purple sword of royalty booming and crumbling in front of the dignity of the draconic knight. Its eyes were filled with immense existential extremity authorities, as at this moment, violet waves of honor began to surge around the golden waves of dignity. Dignity and honor, extremes that the draconic knights of the Sanctus Populi were always covered by, and they were extremes that were very hard to overcome by other lineages, unless it was an Imperium knight with extremely pure blood of an omniversal lineage. The Sanctus princess stroked the sacred of the draconic knight below, as she fearlessly and coldly gazed at the legion that had lined up behind Knight Palmino. Her eyes actually locked onto the golden-haired knight Akalusia, who held the dazzling codex in her hands more than anything else, as towards her, she held a hint of caution. Chapter 2989, Glory 1. An Imperium Knight Legion stood before them. And yet the Sanctus Princess and the Draconic Knight she stood atop of seemed to hold immeasurable honor and dignity before them, as there wasn't an ounce of fear. On top of the Draconic Knight, the Sanctus Princess was one who held many distinctions and titles within the Sanctus Populi. Sanctus Princess Emiliana, the Carver of Truth. She was one of the distinguished Sanctus Princesses who earned the title of Sanctus Protector. The experiences drilled into her by the Sanctus Populi were innumerable as she read and grasped the weavings of what was occurring in an extremely short period of time, especially the presence of a late-arriving Imperium Royal Basilius observer staying back in the far distance. She instantly affirmed that it wasn't a coincidence that the dogs of the Imperium appeared here. She even went further to deduce that they were in this region just like her, looking for the same thing, connecting to what she had witnessed not too long ago. And if she could find out more of what they were looking for, she would also know why her wounds pulled her here. So she stroked the scales of the draconic night below her as her intent breathed out calmly. Whatever could the dogs of the Imperium be doing at a place like this? Far from home, far from your cozy abodes. Her intent weaved out while the Night Legion ahead of her got into a circular formation that covered all gaps, their bodies radiating intense waves of existential authority, as at her words, the sword and shield in the hands of Knight Palmino buzzed. His eyes let out utterly chilling, murderous light as he spat out his weavings. Dogs? Ha ha! I am going to enjoy splitting apart the dominium of another Sanctus Princess while their Dragon Knight watches O. The words Knight Palmino uttered were filled with arcs of power, but the visage of Knight Acalusia arrived with her codex in hand as her authority pressed down on everything, as if everything had to be centered around her. This was a direct effect of the existential extremity authority around her, as it was so potent that she vastly outstripped all other knights here. As if in all existence here, she was the only true royalty. Her golden hair shimmered with brilliance as she grasped the codex in her hands while looking at Sanctus Princess Emiliana closely, her intent weaving out. At a place like this, we are naturally looking for someone. Do you happen to know anything about Noah Osmond? About Vitalis and Vacuous? Her questions may seem like random words to others, but they were meant to get to the root of their purpose here. Hearing such a question, any other entity may have given away signs, but Sanctus Princess Emiliana remained as calm as it was. Uniquely, the pure existential authority of royalty that Knight Acalusia released was capable of radiating an oppressive pressure even on Teleios stage entities to bend them to her will. And yet the Sanctus Princess shrugged it off as if it were nothing when she replied, "The dogs of the Imperium chasing after someone. How unlucky they are. Now, are some of you prepared for the apocalypse of your dominions just for coming across someone else today? Or would you rather go your separate ways?" Dominating weavings bloomed as from the verdant visage of the Sanctus Princess Emiliana. Even more profound waves of dignity and honor blooming and resonating with the existing ones on the draconic night below her. Multiple dominion rules were seemingly ready to be released, and they sought to change the landscape of existence itself, depending on the answer of the Imperium Knight Legion ahead. The eyes of the Imperium Knights shone with a chilling light, while the visage of Knight Acalusia unfurled the codex of extremity she held in her hands, her eyes falling on it as she spoke out impassively. Death is but a part of life. Even though I would rather go about things a different way, the rules of the Imperium are absolute. The Sanctus Princess smiled. I thought so. And she then patted the draconic knight below her as in an instant. Their bodies resonated as the wavelength of their dominions went towards becoming. The eyes of the Imperium Knights became stern as they also knew one thing. No entity was more dangerous than the Sanctus Princess mounted on her dragon. If one couldn't force them to dismount in the first few strokes of the battle, they were in for a heavy fight. Rawr! The existential extremity authority of fusion bloomed amidst dignity and honor, the verdant purple light blazing all around, as even Knight Acalusia pulled back, while the codex in her hands released waves of light that went on to cover everything nearby. It was the start of a heavy battle, as it was at this moment that another entrant to this target both sides were looking for. The visage of Noah, bathed in a radiant, multicolored armament and holding an aegis and spear, his cerulean aurora of wings now released a colorless light that covered him entirely. Not even a wisp of his aura could be felt as he watched on from a distance. The extremity of Lutz licks his lips at the quality of possible already. The extremity of tyranny gazes from its high throne towards the weavings of dignity, honor, and loyalty in the distance. The weavings of authorities being used had their identities ascertained by Noah right away as his extremes began to emanate their desires. The extremity of cheats urges of loot. Existential analytical looter has been activated on all visible targets. The extremity of the protagonist senses a critical opportunity arriving as it utilizes its built-up authority to grant itself yet another identity. After the weaver of extremity, after laying down prophecies, the existential extremity authority of the protagonist moved to do something else with the overabundance of authority it held. Chapter 2990, Glory. Sixth, the weavings of Noah's extremes were churning rapidly as others nearly asked the protagonist what it was doing when it was already designing a daring new prophecy. And yet, this extreme moved rapidly, heavily connecting its weavings to multiple other extremes. The extremity of loot, hero, and villain are drawn into the fold. The extremity of cheats adds itself into the fold. The indomitable extremity of extremity makes what is about to be born even more extreme. His authorities piled on one after another, and in the next instant, the feature of the hero's journey is being actualized. As the protagonist, you cycle through a sequence of events from a call to adventure, trials and ordeals, death and rebirth, all the way to a transformation that leads to your ultimate reward. On this path, countless cannon fodders are ground down to be your fuel, as at this moment, the utmost extreme of the protagonist seeks for a way to gain the ultimate reward of the enemies you face without having to do too much work. After all, everything should come easy if you are truly a great protagonist. The first utilization of the hero's journey, loot marker, can now be activated. So long as you come in contact with the dominium of your target, they will be marked forever as their very existence begins to leak out and become fuel for you, as you begin to attain the ultimate reward early. If this mark cannot be erased, the very existence of the targeted cannon fodder will continue to leak out until they are no more. If the targets have a high percentage of analysis with existential analytical looter, this process will become even faster. The golden light of the protagonist shone brightly. Other authorities supported it with ease as Noah accepted the inflow of information. And he then came to gaze at the shrouding wrapping around him. He was ready to go out with his aegis and spear. But seeing the advent of this new feature, he stopped as he thought for a moment before he called out deep within himself. Ruination. Inside of his soul, a dormant weapon opened its eyes and answered its master's call. The weavings of what Noah wanted flowed into the heart of ruination as a crimson gold light began to bloom in front of Noah, forming into what he wanted. A long-range weapon for him to best utilize the feature of the hero's journey. A bow, ballista, railgun, or sniper rifle. Master? The weavings of ruination echoed out, and Noah answered simply, "Let's test out the bow for now." A dazzling crimson gold bow formed before Noah as thereafter the aegis and spear within his hands turned into a light that covered this crimson gold bow. The force of the infinite existential omniversal seed was applied to this weapon as Noah came to grasp it comfortably. His left hand grabbed the bow as his right hand quickly pulled back the string, his existential extremity authorities leaking and flowing into the stretched string madly, as the shrouding of the infinite existential omniversal seed also flowed its terrific light into the bow. Who? Noah let out a light breath. His visage was invisible. Tendrils of existential light continued to flow and accumulate with his outstretched hand holding the bow, and he didn't release it just yet. He allowed it to continue accumulating power. The massive and heavy flow of the infinite existential omniversal seed continued to amass. His enemies were clashing as he could allow them to create an even more chaotic battlefield. And at the most opportune time when the largest number of his enemies were defending against those in front of them, he would strike from the dark. An instant passed. The clashes of existential authority became even more intense. The two shining points of lights seemed to blaze with a verdant and golden light, one fused with a massive draconic entity as her whole visage was bathed with majesty, the other holding a dazzling codex of extremity that was now radiating a profound gold-purple light that sought to alter the weavings of the surrounding existence entirely. It was to the extent that the flows of the existential extremity authority she released seemed to be resonating with the surrounding weavings of the omniverse itself. What was this? Noah's eyes, with the bowstring outstretched, locked onto the dazzling codex of extremity in her hands, as this was the prime culprit. The codex of extremity was capable of resonating with the weavings of the omniverse itself. What Noah held was not the complete codex of extremity, but he was still studying everything that could be done with it. It seemed he could only truly grasp this with a complete codex, as at this moment, a blinding light of greed flashed within his eyes. He felt the blooming chaos and bidding entropy of the battlefield. He then closed his eyes. His existential body dominium pulsed as his fingers trembled from holding back the string of the bow that was supporting the shocking grandeur of the infinite existential omniversal seed. His origin and soul dominiums reinforced his body as he barely managed to keep it together, the dominium rule of quintessence being layered on as it sought to prevent the activation of any other authorities. A dominium rule of infinity was piled on, as the number of arrows he could release would be many. A dominium rule of loot shone brightly as it made sure the feature of the hero's journey could be achieved so long as the requirements were met. The ebb and flow of entropy reached a shocking level as after some time, Noah opened his eyes once more. His breathing was so supremely calm as if he were doing nothing important, and yet multicolored radiance blazed around him as finally he released the string. And exactly 15 dazzling arrows were released all at once. They slid across the innumerable string like waves of existence and non-existence as they disappeared, and by the time they reappeared one more, they were in front of all targets waging a war against each other far ahead of him. All 15 had their dominiums burning with a shocking purple radiance, some being brighter than others. The Imperium Royal Observer in the back shone with the least brightness as Noah was ready to see. Which of them would he manage to at least touch the dominiums of and activate the feature of the hero's journey? Chapter 2991, Glory 3. The bowstring vibrated. An immense sense of exhaustion dawned on Noah as instant after, his dominiums creaked as they could no longer bear the weight of the existential omniversal shrouding. The dazzling shrouding began to fade from him as his visage receded further from this area, but his eyes never left the unfolding scene ahead. Inside of him, extremity passages began to surge and seethe as they sought to fill up his dominions with power once more. The shrouding of the infinite existential omniversal seed was a terrifying one, as its results were about to show themselves. But its cost was just as heavy, and with Noah in the beginning sky of the primordium stage of existential dominion, he could barely handle it while releasing such a concentrated version of its power like he just did. But for such a high cost, the effects were even more dazzling. In the blooming battlefield of existential authority, and even something relating to the very omniverse itself being stimulated by a codex of extremity, an attack descended on each entity here at the exact same time, and yet the reactions to them were all entirely different. Knight Akalusia seemed to sense the attack the moment it appeared, her gaze placid as she pressed her hand behind her, a sea of boundless purple light and loyalty, as the heavy arrow disappeared into it. Sanctus Princess Emiliana was even more obscene, as while facing both Knight Akalusia and Knight Palmino at the same time, she didn't even turn her head towards the attack as she called out, "Dragon's dignity." Brilliant verdant gold light gleamed as the dazzling multicolored arrow was forced to a stop a distance from her, never even coming close to her or her dominion. Noah gazed at this scene unfolding as It was truly hard to bridge the gap of the stages of power across the Dominion realm, as even a tool like the infinite existential omniversal seed could only just barely give a bridge towards this idea. For the two strongest entities, his attacks never even came close to their dominions. They were too cautious. They were too powerful to allow any variables. But then, there were others who held just a hint of more pride and arrogance in their own power. Facing the instantly appearing attack, Knight Palmino was in the middle of swinging his sword and cutting apart the weavings of existence itself before him, his eyes flashing as he discerned this attack and affirmed it wouldn't have a major impact on him. His dominium could rebuff something like this. And so, boom! The multicolored arrow splintered into a heavy singularity of power as his dominium withstood it easily. He continued on as per normal, but he didn't know. Oh, he didn't know. Loot marker has been applied to a knight of the Imperium, Knight Palmino. Noah's eyes pulsed with brightness as one way or another, loot marker was applied to one of the stronger beings here. And it wasn't over as in the midst of their attacks, the other Imperium knights handled the newly appearing attacks on their own ways, as some swung their existential armaments to rebuff them. Others allowed their armors to withstand it. And in the case of the Imperium Royal Basilius Observer Xavier, in the far distance, not participating in this. Boom! His expression was unsightly, as shockingly, half of his shoulder was blown off. Half. It was a reality that ascertained Noah's power and the power of the infinite existential omniversal seed, that even at its current stage, its output was actually capable of skipping the neonate stage and sequor stage, to be capable of injuring someone at the teleio stage of existential dominium realm. Loot marker has been applied to the Observer Xavier. Loot marker has been applied to a Knight of the Imperium, Knight Rudiger. Loot marker has been applied to a Knight of the Imperium, Knight Viola. Only a single teleo stage entity was injured by it, but others underestimated the nature of this attack as they shook it off with their dominiums and armaments alone. Half of the Knight Legion moving a distance away, while Knight Palmino began to shout vividly. A second enemy hidden in the dark, find them and bring them to the light. His words boomed commandingly as 6 knights turned into lights that spread out towards the surroundings. Knight Akalusia had a stern expression as she controlled the Codex of Extremity, her left hand waving to reveal the endless purple sea containing the shot-out arrow as at this moment, the arrow began to disappear. But she already felt something from it. She affirmed there was a third party besides those from the Sanctus Populi here. Perhaps. A glimmer of a weaving flashed over here as at this moment, the battle entered a new phase as the different forces shifted. She was about to begin utilizing the Codex to uncover everything when... What? The intent of Knight Palmino drew her gaze. His golden hair flowed brilliantly as at this moment, he was touching his face with a twisted expression. This was because gradually, in the past instant after withstanding the arrow that was just shot, a marking began to bloom on his face. It was a pair of eyes and a devilish smile forming on his forehead. As a moment later, boundless golden light gushed forth from the devilish eyes as if they were a passage. Knight Palmino, feeling the very essence of his dominium soul beginning to leak out senselessly. The devilish smile seemed to be cackling in joy. The eyes looked like punctured points of his dominium that gushed out his authority into massive rivers that disappeared into nothingness. And he wasn't the only one, as apart from him, 4 other Imperium Knights and the Observer Xavier also had similar markings blooming on their foreheads. Rivers of golden loot light leaked from them, senselessly, as the terrifying extreme began to truly express itself. Chapter 2992, Glory, Before. Entities that have lived across eons have been branded with the identity of loot markers. Coming across your fable, their status can only be reduced to cannon fodder. Such dazzling prompts bloomed before Noah's eyes as he saw 6 Imperium Knights spread outwards, one coming towards his direction as wondrously. He was among the 4 Imperium Knights, including Knight Palmino, who were marked. They did not use means that stopped the advancement of the arrows Noah had shot, and they instead withstood them with their own dominions. On their foreheads, a devilishly gold smile and eyes were branded as waves of golden light leaped out with maddening fervor and disappeared into oblivion. And yet Noah's own dominion felt these rivers of golden loot light manifesting within. The very existence of Teleo's stage entities is being devoured by you. Rewards that would have come at the latter stages of the hero's journey are being obtained by you now. Weavings of records, existence, and extremes of Teleo's stage entities flow into your dominion. The records of 4 Imperium Knights began to flow into Noah's mind. Their memories, high-level knowledge of the Imperium, knowledge of the legions, and much more. Noah absorbed all of it, as the majority of the golden rivers of loot light were directed towards his forge. From it, the manifestation of illumination acted like a gate. Golden light had to pass through her vision. With a gaze filled with determination, she acted like a beacon and conduit everything had to pass through, the rivers of golden light smashing into her with fervor. She flowed with brilliance. And an instant later, rivers of golden light emanated from her and into the forge as their quantity and quality were much greater than before. In the moment they entered his forge, the rivers of light flowed towards the many infinity symbols stretched out across the forge, their light being absorbed into them as in the next moment. 100 quintessential fruits of existence have been generated. 200 quintessential fruits of existence have been generated. Noah began to use the very lifeblood of Teleos stage entities to forge fruits of existence at a rate even archons would feel jealousy over. The weavings of the existential authority of royalty have increased to the extent that this authority can be taken to the existential level at any time. The weavings of the exclusive existential extremity authority of the Imperium are being grasped. Wah! A dazzling royal golden purple glow of weavings entered Noah as the 4 Imperium Knights affected by his marker began to undertake their own shocking actions. An exclusive existential extremity authority, an authority exclusively belonging to the Imperium. Noah didn't feel any sense of this from his automaton who was absorbing the authority of royalty from the Imperium, Royal Decimara far from here, but his absorption of the dominiums of the Teleos stage Knights of the Imperium granted it. And it was something that Noah saw firsthand in the next moment. His vision was pulled over towards the center of the battlefield, towards Knight Palmino, whose hand ripped the skin on his forehead, that had the devilish smile that seemed to be laughing at him, and the eyes that allowed the authority of his dominium to leak senselessly. Such an action caused the weavings of his existence to explode with such unfathomable anger that his golden eyes themselves distorted, an air of a neon light instantly erupting around him. It stemmed from his very blood. It stemmed from who he was. His intent roared out as a blinding neon light rose all around, daring to blaspheme the glory of the Imperium. The neon light became so potent that above Knight Palmino, an idol with his likeness formed as its gaze was filled with unfathomable glory. Blazing with neon light, an expression as if a form of glory that shouldn't have been challenged was shown as wondrously. Even the flow of the weavings of the surrounding omniverse began to support its brilliance. Such a scene even gave the visage of the Sanctus Princess Emiliana a sharp pause, and this idol of Knight Palmino brought its hands together as it uttered out the identity of the single obscene exclusive existential extremity authority. Wah! A blinding beam of neon light erupted from its clasped hand and bathed Knight Palmino's figure. The carving of devilish smile and eyes on his forehead began to burn as if they were never there, and the idol of Knight Palmino was not done, as its blazing eyes turned towards the expanse of utter darkness across the omniverse. They turned towards Noah's direction, empowered by the very weavings of the surrounding omniverse, as if the Imperium was cradled by it. A neon light illuminated everything towards this direction, and the voice of Knight Palmino thundered out. The one daring to question the glory of the Imperium is there! His voice was the command, and the 6 Imperium Knights converged towards Noah's direction. The one who was already coming towards his direction and was even branded with his loot marker, still leaking, his dominium glared out with waves of wrath as his will spread out to discover any sources of existence here. At this point in time, Noah could very well retreat as there were a great deal of uncertainties. The enemies were also extremely powerful ones, as he was coming to understand from their weavings and memories. But he also liked the challenge and the possible rewards that could come from this as the weavings of quintessence begin sounding the drums of an unstoppable rise. His figure disappeared. Memories and weavings of Knight Palmino were still fresh in his mind as the weavings of plot state that you were always Knight Palmino. His body changed. His dominium emanated a unique new signature. His extremity passages had seethed with mana dynamics as his dominium felt refilled to enact multiple more dominion rules, the shrouding of the infinite existential omniversal seed returning to him. And in the next moment, beside the figure of the Imperium Knight near him, who was branded with his loot marker, Sigh, a visage of Knight Palmino appeared. In the heat of the battle, the Imperium Knight only affirmed the visage and existential signature of the Knight Commander he always knew before he continued to direct his authority to find the enemy. He didn't know. Oh, he didn't know. Chapter 2993. Glory 5. The battlefield was a chaotic one, as the moment the intent of Knight Palmino spread out was also the time that Noah's visage adorning the looks of Knight Palmino arrived beside the other Imperium Knight. His dominium was already facing a leakage as a devilish smile cackled and smiled on his forehead, which his very existence leaked out. He was not in his prime state. He didn't catch the small-minute things that may have given it away. So the moment he turned his attention forward to continue seeking the enemy that had actually dared to brand him and begin stealing his very own authority. S.A.! Like a silent snake, a dazzling spear appeared behind him. A spear carrying the weight of Noah's dominiums. A spear carrying multiple dominium rules of his extremes. A spear carrying the very weight and glory of the infinite existential omniversal seed. It wasn't an attack that was spreading out across 15 different existences this time around, as the weight and glory of the infinite existential omniversal seed was focused on this Imperium Knight in front of Noah alone. The body of this Imperium Knight had multiple parts lit up brightly under the gaze of the existential analytical looter, the brightest of all beings his gloriously golden shining head. And the back of this head was where Noah struck in an utterly obscene and devilish manner. Boom! Like the heavy thunk of two singularities colliding, akin to an unstoppable force meeting an immovable object. The glory of the infinite existential omniversal seed pressed down, and the dominium of its target shuddered as facing ahead. His eyes could only open in unimaginable shock that very quickly transformed into wrath as this being felt a part of his dominium actually shatter and crack. He bellowed out and became covered with a blinding light that warped him a distance away. But the deed was done. Where he used to be, a spear filled with golden blood and thick brain matter could be seen as when the Imperium Knight appeared again, one could see the back of his head blown out as if it were a watermelon, his visage twitching uncontrollably as he stared with a mix of shock and incredulity ahead. He saw the culprit. He then saw the visage of Imperium Knight Palmino, who had the same likeness as the culprit as everything clicked. But before anything else could be done, this enemy disappeared one more, and a heavy injury was actually left behind on the body of a Teleos stage entity. Knight Acalusia and Sanctus Princess Emiliana also saw the brief glimpse of this new enemy as their eyes flashed with a profound brilliance. But Noah was gone just as quickly as he showed himself, and the reason for this was only visible before his eyes. A critical attack has occurred on the target as the percentage of the existential analytical looter has reached 25% for the Imperium Knight Augustus. The existential illusory weaving vibe one of Augustus is now coming to fruition. The power, rules, and restrictions of those at the existential dominium realm were different as at his current stage. Noah couldn't just repeat the ease that he initially had with the Mimestai. He had to reach a set percentage of analysis before he conjured up an existential illusory weaving V1. So he very quickly made an exit towards the infinite existential omniversal seed, reappearing within the bounds of incandescent brilliance where his throne and the manifestation of the infinite existential omniversal seed stood. His expression was grand, and yet his dominiums creaked from the pressure of the existential omniversal shrouding, as once more he felt like he squeezed everything out of his body to critically injure an existence 2 stages above where he currently stood. In front of him, the visage of the illusory weaving V1 was forming with a golden light, as this was the grandest accomplishment yet. 25% of all damage dealt to the existential illusory weaving V1 Knight Augustus will be passed through to the main body of Knight Augustus. Yes, the culmination of his achievements after risking being in the same space as the monsters at the Teleos stage of existential dominium. Noah stretched his weary dominiums as he spoke out commandingly. Let's make another jump to a different location and go all out in pressing your glory onto this illusory weaving. Wah! The first part of his command was understandable. The infinite existential omniversal seed had warped once before, and it could warp again. The second part of his command was a terrifying one. Noah himself could utilize existential omniversal shrouding to express the power of the infinite existential omniversal seed where he was. He was merely a conduit, as to wield it came at a heavy cost. But the infinite existential omniversal seed was a construct that could also be utilized as a weapon in itself, where in the past, Noah had even used to throw it at his enemy. After a certain incident where something unfortunate occurred, and he had to dip into the reversal of the time-space continuum to get back to an earlier time, he committed to not using this construct in such a manner as he remained true to it now. But the infinite existential omniversal seed could express its own offensive features, as it so chose. And if Noah brought a powerful enemy into its bounds, the glory and weight he was only acting as a conduit of before could be pressed down on such an enemy freely. And what better enemy was there than one who couldn't even attack them? What better enemy than an existential illusory weaving of their true target, whom they could damage freely, while a portion of this damage passed through? The answer was a glorious reality. Incandescent mountainous passages, churning with mana dynamics, seethed across the infinite existential omniversal seed, as with a glimmer of silent brilliance. It warped to another location across the omniverse. And at the same time, the heavy weight of the infinite existential omniversal seed became focused on an existential illusory weaving of an Imperium Knight. Noah had already injured. Chapter 2994, Glory, V6. In the surroundings of Knight Augustus, one Imperium Knight after another arrived to support and defend him, 4 of such entities appearing around him protectively. Each was adorned in shining existential armaments, as they were a sign of grace and honor. And yet at this moment, the sight of half the head of Atileo's stage knights being split open was a heavy one, as they couldn't allow this cowardish enemy that came and went to continue his attacks. In the distance, Knight Palmino had a burning gaze, as even though he had scorched the devilish smile and eyes from his forehead, he could feel wisps of it trying to form once more, as including Knight Augustus, there were 2 other Imperium Knights whose existence was leaking out continuously. With an interminable gaze, he looked at Knight Acalusia and the 5 other Imperium Knights supporting her as his intent oozed out. You got the blasphemous Sanctus filth? I will track down her compatriot. His dominiums buzzed as he already made a decision on the weaving of things. Without even looking back and focusing on the fused Dragon Knight and Sanctus Princess, emanating immense waves of dignity and honor, Knight Acalusia replied with a stern gaze. They are not compatriots. That unidentified entity may just be the Noah Osmont we're looking for. Terrific words rang out with her intent as the pupils of Knight Palmino dilated. Even the figures of the Sanctus Princess and her mount raged with might at such a possibility as in the distance, the figure of Knight Palmino wanted to scoff in incredulity. Noah Osmont? The seed involved in the disappearance of the existential domain? She wanted to say that he could be the unidentified entity that could attack all 15 of them at once and even heavily injure a Teleo stage Imperium Knight. Such a thing was preposterous. Such a thing. Knight Palmino gritted his teeth until the enamel within them began to break. The eyes of Knight Acalusia were clear and free of any falsehoods, as when gazing at them, Knight Palmino could only see a reflection of himself. So he ground his teeth further while flashing away in the direction of Knight Augustus. Could a fucking seed actually be capable of this? Could boom! His already dilated pupils expanded ever further, as just at the time he arrived near the protective encirclement around Knight Augustus, the back half of his head that was just trying to heal caved in once again, as his expression greatly shifted. The Imperium Knights around him exploded with existential authority, as even Knight Palmino radiated the exclusive existential extremity authority of the Imperium towards Knight Augustus. And yet, crunch! His head's skeletal structure continued to be deformed along with his dominium, as if there was a constantly applied destructive force that wouldn't let up until everything about him was broken. And whatever the source of the damage was, even the encirclement of 5 Imperium Knights could not stop it. The dominium of Imperium Knight Augustus buzzed as waves of existential light rose from him, but the force pressing down was relentless. Around him, multiple layers of glorious protective layers of royal purple light had risen from the knights around him, and yet they did nothing to prevent the pressure coming from all around. The gazes of the knights turned extremely somber as Knight Palmino came behind the trembling visage of Augustus and placed his hands on his back, his intent booming out. Support your fellow knight. No knight of the Imperium shall be pushed even close to peril when other knights are present. From his connected hand, immense life force began to flow from his dominium and into Knight Augustus. Seeing his deteriorating state, the other knights also came beside him with their hands outstretched, their dominiums also radiating an immense force of existence that went on to support Knight Augustus. At the same time, Knight Palmino actually called out towards the distance. "Knight Commander Akalusia!" He actually laid down his pride and called out towards the only one here holding a vibrant codex of extremity. While a shocking show of support occurred in a certain space, Noah's infinite existential omniversal seed was warped somewhere else entirely, while the weight of this construct continued to press down on the illusory weaving Vi, one of Augustus. The results from this were wondrous all around. An ever grander quantity of loot is coming in from the targets with a successful loot marker. The dominium of one particular cannon fodder is being devoured with quintessential speed. The very weavings of Imperium Knight Augustus flow into your being. An influx of existential authority from different dominiums is flowing into your marked target to stabilize their dominium, causing an even grander absorption of authority to take place. 2,000 quintessential fruits of existence have been generated. 5,000 quintessential fruits of existence have been generated. A scene of glory. Shining with multiple colors, thousands of fruits of existence formed inside Noah's forge. As immeasurable, loot light passed through ruination and became amplified, and it was then turned into grander forms of loot that when Noah looked at the vast numbers forming, is it not enough to take me to the peak of the Primordium stage? Will the death of a Teleos stage Imperium Knight be enough to move all my dominiums? He didn't follow the same path as others. While others focused on a single dominium and rose that to an extreme, he was bringing his body, origin, and soul together as one. He was challenging a long-standing rule that quite literally stated what he was doing was pointless and useless. But the sheer number of resources he was collecting were enough to propagate a shocking change. And in all of this wonder would truly be successful in killing a Teleos stage expert while using the power of the infinite existential omniversal seed. Could he actually gain a silent assassin at the Teleos stage at this moment in time? Chapter 2995, Existential Destroyers 1. His path was always a quick one. He achieved in an extremely short period of time what took others millions of years. The secret to this was nothing grand, with him simply devouring the year's worth of work others already did, amplifying it further in quantity and quality, and then devouring all of this and assimilating it into himself. What he was doing now with a terrific entity at the Teleos stage of existential dominium realm was exactly this, as after putting in the work and amassing thousands of fruits of existence, take it all in. He sat back on his grand multicolored throne after leaving it for barely just a few seconds. And yet he looked like an emperor who was returning from a grand venture and deserved his much-needed rest. The moment his intent weaved out, his body, origin, and soul moved. Your dominiums face a quintessential amount of nourishment as they begin fully traversing your primordium stage of existential dominium realm. His body began to blaze with golden flames. His origin pulsed with its Elythian havens, his extremity veil vibrating as his soul annealed ever further. His dominiums began to progress and expand as if they were ancient engines, with his intent being to see just how far he would go, as while he was in the midst of this, prompts of continued and increased attainment of more fruits of existence from the Imperium Knight Augustus came. The infinite existential omniversal seed applied its shocking weight on the existential illusory weaving vibe one of Augustus, and he remained strong even now. At such a time, Noah raised his brows as he felt the tingling of weavings, and it was actually the infinite existential omniversal seed that released its intent towards him. I am receiving the weavings of a message from one of the Teleos stage entities we targeted. They seem to have backtracked the source of the attack on them and intricately sent out an intent across it. Phishing, for the most part. Shall I receive and convey it? The manifestation of the infinite existential omniversal seed turned towards Noah on his high throne and asked. Noah tilted his head while tapping his throne as he felt the expansion of his dominium and replied, "Any possible dangers from doing this? No, Master. I have even forged 1,000 proxies of myself so far across different points of the Omniverse, and I can receive her intent on any of these proxies for extra measures."
What?
The infinite existential omniversal seed showed its wonders, and what some may call paranoia, as it had already been doing many points of countermeasures. After listening to it, Noah waved his hands to produce a small portion of his will. "Take my will to the proxy, you will receive this intent within." The weavings of existence show yet another possible favorable pathway there. Weavings of a possibility. It could be something, it could be nothing. But there was no harm in following up on it. A glimmer of brilliance flashed as Noah's will entirely disappeared, traversing across weavings of existence and non-existence until it appeared in a field of incandescent green. A vibrant miniature Alethean haven of prana spread out all around, carrying a trace of the infinite existential omniversal seed. Noah's will manifested within such a space as the intent of the infinite existential omniversal seed spread out. I'm allowing the transmission of the weaving now. Her voice became faint at the end, as in the next moment, an intent filled with honor and dignity came through. It formed into the visage of a gorgeous woman with verdant hair, her green eyes filled with hues of gold and even a hint of purple as she gazed around her before coming to lock onto Noah's figure. An arrow wasn't the welcome I expected to receive when I set off looking for a hunch. Her voice was calm as it echoed out, Noah listening to it while being even calmer as he waved his hands to conjure a green throne which he sat on, while continuing to gaze at her calmly, as if to tell her to state her business. The formed weaving read the atmosphere of the surrounding reality while developing a sense of the personality of the entity before her as her intent continued. Not too long ago, the name Noah Osmont arose from the mouths of the Imperium as the culprit for the decimation of an entire existential domain. Of course, any words said by a member of the Imperium have a 90% chance of being a lie or a distorted version of truth. I followed a hunch to ascertain this truth, as the night I sent off to attain information from the legacies of Al-Abalim and Ignatius tell me one thing, and your current actions against the Imperium Knights tell me another. But putting all weavings together creates an impossible story for the one known as Noah Osmont. As she spoke, she waved her own hands, her authority weaving to fork a draconic scaled throne that he sat on, while a green dress adorned her manifestation. The one known as Noah Osmont was apparently just a weak seed, and yet the perspectives of the Basilius of Al-Abalim and Ignatius is that this weak seed was the one that destroyed an existential domain. And that same weak seed has just released an attack I find interesting, and gone even further to critically injure an Imperium Knight, not fitting the story of an existential destroyer. Putting it all together paints a story that makes me wish to complete my duty as a Sanctus Princess, to have located a talent capable of standing against the Imperium, the existential destroyers, and to point them towards the Sanctus Populi. Her purpose was made clear after a number of words. Her beauty was enough to recruit millions of men, but Noah paid no heed to it as he continued to gaze at her calmly. And the visage of the Sanctus Princess Emiliana was even more unfettered at this moment as she continued. How much do you know about the Imperium? About the existential destroyers? About the ones who incarcerated an entire omniversal lineage and their branches to become seeds in endless cycles within domains where the only thing that mattered was profits? Chapter 2996, Existential Destroyers. The sect, The words, the manifestation of an entity uttered out in front of Noah, were heavy ones that may make any layman shocked. The Imperium held another name on their banner, but it was not one they took on themselves. Existential destroyers. The destroyers of existence itself. Entities who incarcerated an entire omniversal lineage, and every possible branch that was a part of such a lineage to be seeds inside existential domains. If you are truly what they term a seed from one of these existential domains, then somewhere in your blood, there may lie trace amounts of an omniversal lineage long forgotten through time. The distinction of a seed is demeaning to your existence and the existences of countless others. You are no seed, nor am I some filth that should merely be something to be butchered under the swords of the Imperium. Whom? As she spoke, the adornments around her became more and more pristine, waves of verdant golden light wrapping around her figure, as she seemed an entity who held honor and dignity deep in her bones, an entity steeped in royalty. She actually told Noah that he may have a trace of an omniversal lineage inside him, with his blood running the possibility of being descended down from eons upon eons, or he may also be entirely disconnected and simply stemmed from a natal lineage within his natural existential domain. At such words, Noah couldn't help but smile, and the distinguished visage of a royalty continued. I am Emiliana, one distinguished as a Sanctus Princess from the Sanctus Populi, a bastion for the people, a bastion for all of those who cannot defend themselves. You may already know much of what I speak of, or you may not know in a limited fashion. I know not the extent and truth behind what happened to the recently destroyed existential domain, nor do I know much about you. But for being capable enough, and even more crucial, brave enough to strike against the Imperium in the way you are doing now, I have to do my duty as a Sanctum Princess and offer you the grace of protection. You are aware of what they will do regarding you now? Her words ended with a question, an important one, as she was insinuating the gravity of the situation Noah found himself in by being brave enough to actually target and attack Knights of the Imperium. Injuring a knight alone was enough to condemn one to death and destruction with surety. Having the dominion blood of a knight on one's hands? Actually killing an Imperium knight or important members of the Imperium within their royals, enclaves, or legacies? There was nowhere one could hide in the Omniverse to escape their pursuit after such actions. Nowhere under the light and darkness of the Omniverse will provide a shield or shade for you. Sometimes it will even feel like the Omniverse itself is against you, as if it favors and bends under the will of the Imperium. That is how much authority they have gained over the eons due to their cruel actions, to the extent that under the banner even omniversal authorities become their tools. W.A. She uttered words that minutes ago may have caused Noah to have a genuine surprise, before he attained years' worth of memories and weavings of the Knights of the Imperium, before he began draining the existence of Knight Augustus and the lifeblood of those choosing to support him at this moment. Omniversal authorities. The inkling he had seen from the one holding a complete codex of extremity, Knight Akalusia, the one who made moves to the extent that it seemed even the surroundings of the Omniverse themselves were inflating and enhancing her will and existential authority. The memories of Knight Augustus flowed into his mind as they carried weavings of information relating to this. And Sanctus Princess Emiliana spoke of such matters while extending her hand towards Noah. I know not your circumstances, but I can always carry out my duties as a Sanctus Princess and offer you a shade amidst all of this. Any power we have that stands against the Imperium, all the closer we come to liberating all those that have been oppressed over the eons. The Sanctus Populi is able to obscure the gaze of the Imperium and take you under our banner to protect you from the persecution and death before it fully comes raining down. But I seem to have spoken a great deal here. What say you, Noah Osmont? The Sanctus Princess finished her monologues and gazed towards Noah for a reply. She offered shade from a threat that was about to get immeasurably worse, a threat one couldn't so easily escape across the Omniverse. And yet, towards such a reality, Noah only smiled as he was about to leave his intent. He was about to. His manifested will in this space buzzed in the next instant, though. A heavy air of ancientness suddenly emanated from him, that caused the weaving of the manifestation of Sanctus Princess Emiliana to be bewildered before her eyes opened in shock. Noah only captured a glimpse of this as he was focusing on himself, more so on his main body, but after beginning the devouring and assimilation of thousands of fruits of existence coming from the lifeblood of Teleos, stage knights of the Imperium, your existential dominium soul, existential dominium body, and existential dominium origin have attained enough substance to truly embark on the theorized pathway of your realm. Such a prompt came as his main body in the infinite existential omniversal seed became surrounded by a refulgence of brilliance, and many more prompts followed. Your three dominiums resonate and attain an existential convergence that gives way to the existential primordium dominium core, a culmination of your achievements, a culmination of your existence. Inside Noah's existence, his origin, body, and soul became superimposed as they enacted Noah's primordium dominium core. In the center of his existence, between all of his three dominiums. Chapter 2997 Primordium 1. The essence was so palpating that Noah's figure rose from his resplendent throne, tendrils of existential authority following his rise and flowing into him as his arms and legs spread out. Boom! Tremendous waves of existential authority converged around him as a circular singularity formed with essence coursing in from all directions, everything directed towards a point that was Noah's absolute center. This was the location of the existential primordium dominium core. The very extreme of his body converged towards it, along with the extreme of his soul and origin. It seemed like three sharp points converging towards the very center of himself, and the circular singularity surrounding him showed a wondrous manifestation of three equal triangles coming together. All of it accumulated together into a dazzling core. It shone with a dazzling milky white luster. It was the existential primordium dominium core, an unfathomable achievement. Your dominiums have formed a type of omniversal singularity at the very core. The existential primordium dominium core is a pathway not yet entirely understood with your current weavings and the weavings of the infinite existential omniversal seed, but it currently seems like a starting point for the grander omniverse. It was something Noah was stumbling onto that was so fantastic that his weavings did not fully understand it, nor did the weavings of even the infinite existential omniversal seed. But how did it truly come about? What factors contributed to its fruition? His choice of elevating all three dominiums since the very beginning. Other people in the past eons may have done so too. The quintessential fruits of existence, his foundation, or something else entirely. The answer did not rise yet, as at this moment, weavings of what this buzzing, omniversal singularity began flowing into Noah's mind. The existential primordium dominium core will absorb all incoming existential resources and distribute them across your three dominiums, elevating them to the same extent as if they were a single collective dominium. The cost of elevating the existential primordium dominium core is still much higher than other dominiums of the soul, origin, and body, with your stage of primordium being tremendously different from the neonate stage of existential dominium realm. The wonders of this unique omniversal singularity continued to flow within Noah's mind as both he and the infinite existential omniversal seed had to unveil the weavings of its mystery. While this occurred, a unique aura was released from Noah that even his sectioned wills and clones expressed. An aura that, in a proxy haven, stretched out somewhere in the omniverse, a part of his will that was meeting with the intent of a certain Sanctus Princess also emanated. And at that moment, her gaze had changed. She was stern and earnest before, as even with her high position as a Sanctus Princess, she didn't consider herself of insurmountable importance compared to others. She didn't show a hint of arrogance towards Noah. She spoke to him as an equal, regardless of their positions. But she still has her power. She still had her backing. Even if she was trained not to be arrogant towards others and to practice a sense of humility, there was still a certain sense of royalty and wonder entrenched deep in her bones. Yet at this moment, within the depths of her soul, she found this royalty being shaken by the aura that Noah radiated. Wasn't this an aura that the elder queens of the Sanctus Populi emanated? A sense of awe and power of those getting intimately close to the omniverse itself? How was Her eyes found themselves vibrating as her words leaked out. And yet, before she could even finish, the unique aura Noah emanated was retracted and faded away a moment later, as if it never existed. He looked at her and released a devilish smile as he nodded. "Sorry about that. We were talking about the shadow that can be provided by the Sanctus Populi. Although the thought is a nice one, I do not think I will need it." Boundless tyranny rose with his very being as he spoke such words. Anyone hearing them would have to bend down and understand that he was saying the wonders of the Imperium, the might that countless others feared and could not even escape. He was stating that he wasn't among those who were fearful. He wasn't among those who would worry and tremble over the swords of the Imperium. His words shook Sanctus Princess Emiliana from her trance as she refocused. She wanted to ignore the aura she just felt. She wanted to alter the words she wanted to say. She wanted to even address it further. But seeing his dismissive demeanor, she swallowed most of her words and proceeded carefully. "I won't call you foolish, nor will I question how you can confidently say such things. But what say you regarding the aid and knowledge of the Sanctus Populi? You will have to undergo a process of verification, but the means and power of the Sanctus Populi are for the people, for the good of the people. Salus Populi Suprema Lex Esto." Wah! The good of the people was the supreme law. The Sanctus Princess Emiliana uttered this as Noah squinted his eyes and nodded. "While I may not necessarily need protection, there is no harm in the power of numbers and expanding my horizons." His words were simple, but what they would come to mean, what they would come to signify for this omniverse, nobody had yet even fathomed. And as such words were stated, far away from this proxy of a haven, there was still the ongoing battle between the Red Legion of the Imperium and the main body of Emiliana and her Dragon Knight. Facing her, the eyes of Knight Acalusia suddenly shifted and became somber, as even though she had the upper hand, the situation of Knight Augustus in the distance and the intent of the enemy before her caused her heart to feel a great sense of unease. What had just happened? Chapter 2998, Primordium. The flow of the battle held a certain direction. Knight Acalusia could read this flow very well, and knew that when it began to change, it was never a positive sign. Especially so when she was tapping into an omniversal authority to achieve what she wanted, and yet no progress was made. Very few people of their stage understood omniversal authority. But those who were especially in tune and knowledgeable would know that if you have a battle starting, and you were the only within it who was influencing omniversal authority in some way, and yet you were still losing, then this wasn't a battle that you were intent on winning. If even you being the only one tapping into its influence, and still the flow of the battle wasn't yours, then this was the universe telling you that in this particular case, you were going against the flow of the omniverse, and whatever authority required to change this flow would either come at an unfathomable cost, or it would be entirely impossible to achieve. This was a unique knowledge on omniversal authority. In all battles she commanded this Imperium legions in, they could always readily influence and tip the scales of the flow of the omniverse to their favor and finish them in the victory of the Imperium. As a holder of the Codex of Extremity within this legion, she knew. Thus, she also had to be the one to make heavy and decisive choices when she understood the very flow of the omniverse was currently against their actions, and they did not have sufficient authority to change it. She didn't have to grasp the intricate changes of it, or understand what exactly made this Sanctus Princess special, but she had to make the choice. The codex in her hand shone and released millions of rays of white and purple rays of light that looked like a rain of existential light that covered everything. At the same time, she released an undeniable and commanding intent towards all Imperium knights under her. Disengage in the battle and retreat at once. Take care of the injured and regroup, and the mission parameters will be reassessed after we report.
Extreme temperature
A heavy set of
detected.
words. A decision other leaders would rarely have the guts to make. Yet she made it right away, as in the far distance, Knight Palmino, who had his hand supporting Knight Augustus, continued to have his dominium oppressed and crushed down, had his gaze changed greatly. The Imperium knights around him were the same as wondrously. When Knight Palmino would have otherwise argued or questioned the choice of Knight Acalusia, he simply hardened his gaze this time while sending out a command of affirmation. Let's go! Under our watch, none of us will ever come close to experiencing a Dominium death. His life force and weavings bubbled endlessly as they flowed into Knight Augustus, he and the other knights retreating in a formation while still providing him support. On the other side of the battle, the 5 knights supporting Knight Acalusia against the Sanctus Princess also flashed into a glimmer of brilliance and disappeared, and the waves of white and purple covering everything obscured their weavings greatly. At a certain point, the Sanctus Princess fused with the Dragon Knight seemed to have sensed something as her hands wielding palpable dignity and honor came down, her eyes weaving across existence to lock on the disappearing visage of Knight Acalusia, as within them, she could see calculation and immense intent. An intent that said she truly wasn't done with all of this, and all of them. But after the surge of purple-white brilliance began to fade, so did all waves of existential light, as when Sanctus Princess Emiliana gazed ahead of her, the members of the Imperium Legion were nowhere to be seen. Her gaze was calm as it had always been. The Sanctus Maximum had already told her when her time of death would be, and it was not here. So Emiliana was never worried since this battle began. But still, for it to end this way, she was once again shown the decisiveness of Imperium legions and what made them so deadly. They could come and go rapidly, as after they pulled back and reassessed, they would send a terrifying enough force to accomplish their prior mission. A stellar display if there ever was one, Sanctus Princess. The intent of the Dragon Knight below her came out as their fusion came to an end, but the gaze of Emiliana was difficult to read. Her verdant tendrils of hair flowed on her fair skin once more, as her gaze became sharper while looking ahead. Maybe so, maybe so. Let us change our course. We shall be heading back to base and taking with us a guest and possible knight to join our Sanctus Populi. Send a message to the other knights to retreat, and I shall alert our Sanctus Elder Queen Mother. Oh, who has the honor of being escorted by Sanctus Princess Emiliana? Honor. During their fusion, their intents were one, but the Sanctus Princess was always in control, as the Dragon Knight did not know everything. The gaze on Emiliana was difficult as she replied about the entity joining them towards their base, an entity she was trying to fully understand, especially after his eruption of an aura that she had only sensed on Elder Queens. The one joining us is Noah Osmont, a name that had been uttered a few times today. Yet every time it was uttered, the circumstances so greatly changed, to the extent one would wonder that when it was mentioned next, just how different would the weavings of existence be? The answer was entirely unknown, as back in his own domain, thousands of fruits of existence swirled around Noah's main body as they were shredded into pure multicolored light that surged into the primordium core at the center of his body, his 3 dominiums shuddering with brilliance and becoming even more intense as many sets of prompts continued before him. Of particular importance, related to a certain knight facing the weight of the infinite existential omniversal seed constantly. The analysis of Knight Augustus has reached 80%. The percentage of damage passed to the main body of this marked target has quintessentially increased. Enough of his weavings have been devoured to grant the collapse of a dominium, and yet the weavings of other entities are supporting him. The weavings of those stabilizing the dominium of Knight Augustus begin flowing into you. Chapter 2999, Primordium, 3rd. It was a wondrous development. Knight Augustus himself continued to face the onslaught of the infinite existential omniversal seed, as his dominium maintained a constant state of absorption. And now even those supporting him had their weavings grasped by Noah. It was a battle of time and power to decide whether, in the very near future, Noah would have a Teleos stage knight of the Imperium under his banner. And as his existential primordium dominium core stabilized, even more fruits of existence broke down and turned into streams of essence that were assimilated into it. Noah was still learning about it. The infinite existential omniversal seed was still learning about it, and more of its weavings revealed themselves as Noah continued to devour the eons worth of work of multiple Imperium knights. He found that his existential extremity authorities were attracted to the primordium core uniquely, like they could be attached there and utilized in some way. A feature of the primordium dominium core has been unveiled. The weavings of specific existential extremes can be utilized to have their dominium rules preset and saved within the primordium core, ready to be unleashed at any time with a delay or usage of authority thereafter. The pull his extremes felt was explained as Noah's eyes opened wide. In life, one had to utilize their authority to pay down their power or alteration of existence. An entity at the existential dominium realm could utilize his extremes at extremely high levels by releasing dominium rules. One had to pay a heavy cost to release dominium rules, their existential reserves of their dominiums slowly being utilized over time. Yet at this moment, the usage of Noah's primordium core stated that he could set dominium rules inside this core in advance and release them at any time at no cost. It was akin to saving already cast skills and having them in reserve, and one was capable of releasing as many as they chose in any manner. How many dominium rules could Noah preset in the primordium core? Was there a limit? Could he set tens or hundreds of terrifying dominium rules and then release them against an enemy all at once? The possibilities for what this could be were endless, as... Let us start with loot. Noah spoke out commandingly as he began to tweak with his newly forged primordium core by sending the weavings of loot into it and presetting dominium rules. The more he utilized it, the more he would come to understand it, as at this moment, the manifestation of the infinite existential omniversal seed looked at his blinding visage and the resplendent milky white light of the primordium core around him, her intent weaving of with glory. With this primordium core, I sense a closeness with the omniverse far more than before. If this primordium is considered an omniversal singularity, then once it matures and sprouts to the next stage, you may just begin to touch upon weavings of omniversal authorities. The intent of the infinite existential omniversal seed foretold of a glorious future, also going forward to show just how different Noah's realm was compared to others. The dominiums of others may not touch upon something as the influence of omniversal laws until possibly long after the teleos stage, and yet Noah would very likely be touching up on this just on the first stage of primordium. At the center of all authorities, Noah smiled at the words of the infinite existential omniversal seed as he voiced out his own intent. What do you think of this Sanctus Princess Emiliana? The entity to entrench Noah into the intricate workings of the omniverse. He asked about her as the manifestation of the infinite existential omniversal seed replied, "She is a good prospect for a dual cultivation partner. We have to see the resonance and utilization of the dominium realm." Noah blinked at the reply of the infinite existential omniversal seed, as this wasn't the intent behind his question. Smiling wryly thereafter, as the infinite existential omniversal seed felt his true intent and answered again with a straight face. The path she provides will entoil us further into a faction within this omniverse, but it is clear who the enemies are, as what is left behind is to understand what purpose all these factions truly have. UAA. Yes, all factions had their purpose. Their true purpose they kept to themselves, the purpose they spoke of to others and preached. Sometimes they were one and the same, but more commonly, they always deviated. Very well, let us go observe what lies in store for the Sanctus Populi. His body buzzed with a wondrous light as part of himself left and didn't leave at the same time. His dominium soul parted, and yet he sensed a unique entanglement with his primordium core as he felt like every part of himself was still there. It was yet another boon of the primordium core that he had to understand. The arcs of battle still remained in the surroundings, as the visage of Sanctus Princess Emiliana and her dragon knight were the only thing that remained. At this moment in time, her dragon knight had transformed into a dazzling young man whose eyes burned with unfathomable valor, a purple robe draping over him as he stood behind Emiliana, akin to a protector that would die before even a hair on her was ever touched. Their two figures didn't remain alone for long, as within moments, the weavings of existence flashed, and the figure of a devilishly majestic emperor appeared, his fair skin shining with untold splendor, as he was adorned in a sharp white dress shirt and obsidian dress pants, with the extremity of quintessence choosing not to adorn an emperor's robe, or his battle outfit of simple sleek obsidian pants and a bare chest. It was his Dominium soul arriving before the Sanctus Princess Emiliana and her dragon knight as adorned like a manager of an investment fund. Noah appeared before them with a smile. His dark hair flowed back wildly as he couldn't suppress the unique air around him. Even the dragon knight beside Emiliana looking at him with caution as he sensed something he couldn't fully explain. Sanctus Princess. Dragon Knight Alder. His eyes shone with untold brilliance. He arrived before the members of the Sanctus Populi as he was about to be led into the domains of one of the main factions of this omniverse. Chapter 3000. Primordium, a fourth. As his Dominium soul arrived before the figures stemming from the Sanctus Populi, adorned in a sleek, laid-back white dress shirt and obsidian pants, Noah was still doing many things in the background as he prepared. Even as his Primordium core continued to form and express its wonders, some of Noah's extremes continued to carry out their own weavings. One of the more prominent ones, who was the one to also spearhead the feature of the hero's journey and its subsequent loot marker, it was the protagonist. Around this same time, within the Primordium core of his Dominiums, where many existential extremity authorities were already laying down preset Dominium rules, an intent roused its head with heavy fervor. The protagonist states that the time to unveil another prophecy has come. One of the main movers among Noah's extremes rose once more as gorgeous golden flames began to wrap around his body and spread out all around. The extremity of cheats gazes towards loot with a sense of doubt and questions whether the theorized prophecy is balance-breaking enough. The protagonist disdains to even give an answer as it lets results speak for themselves. The weaver of extremity and existence is laying down a new prophecy. The surrounding weavings shook, and of Noah's Dominiums, the existential Primordium Dominium core spun with low and immeasurably heavy rotations. It was all according to plan. Dumb. A beat began to resound. Dumb, heavy and thick. One couldn't escape it across all of the infinite, existential, omniversal sea. The protagonist begins the flow of an undeniable prophecy. Robbed honor and glory become commonplace, their process undeniable once in place. To ends of existence, to the beginnings of extremes, a pioneer rises that has never been seen. Legacies and enclaves are many in between, but which can stand against an omniversal engine? Twist and turn again, until what is rare becomes all the same. Weaving of... The prophecy was proceeding smoothly with the voice of the protagonist echoing out. It was proceeding smoothly. But then out of nowhere, Noah's slowly turning existential Primordium Dominium core buzzed and radiated a heavy milky white luster. And Noah's surroundings began to tremble. And such a trembling spread far and wide, even coming to flow outside of the infinite existential omniversal sea itself. The flow of existence and non-existence in this space shockingly became effective as an unfathomably heavy aura descended, with the voice of the protagonist that had been ringing out valiantly doing so once more after the pause, but it was distinctly different. As if another influence has descended as from the altered flow of the surroundings of existence and non-existence itself, from the omniverse itself, the blooming prophecy gained a form of an influence from the very weavings of the surrounding omniverse. Twist and turn again, all existence and non-existence shall bend all the same. Twist and turn again, serfs and kings shall feel the same pain. Twist and turn again, till the wheel of existence deviates and shatters with pulsing veins. Twist and turn again, till a new realm resonates with eons reign. The surroundings trembled, the weavings of the protagonist were tumultuous. Its prophecy was altered in the latter half, a repetition of words being used that it did not design. The influence of the surrounding lands and omniverse itself seemed to step in and add to this, as after its statement, even Noah himself had to sit down and understand what the latter half of the prophecy referred to. His gaze was somber, as within his forming and expanding Primordium core, the golden essence of the protagonist temporarily became heavier than any others as it congealed and flowed with heavy immensity. Twist and turn again, all existence and non-existence shall bend all the same. This was the start of the deviated prophecy. All existence and non-existence shall bend all the same. Serfs and kings shall feel the same pain, till the wheel of existence deviates and shatters from pulsing veins, till a new realm resonates with eon's reign. They were a set of heavy words that Noah treated in his mind over and over again. But they didn't give away any true meanings, as the words that the protagonist had prepared and designed itself in the first half of the prophecy. Their wonders were already beginning to show. What the protagonist stated was not just a premonition of what the future would be. It was a usage of its authority to push for that future, to apply a corrective existential extremity authority to make that future a reality by all means. And so since its conception, its authority became even heavier, as this prophecy dealt with weavings of the omniverse itself, and the primordium core that was an omniversal singularity made it so that even the influence of the omniverse was applied to this prophecy. Robbed honor and glory become commonplace, their process undeniable once in place. The first part of the prophecy, simple in nature and not at all complex to grasp. The heavy toiling and turning of the primordium core at the center of Noah's existence pulsed and radiated out a terrifying pressure to apply the corrective existential authority to ensure the flow of this line of the prophecy. Far away from Noah, across the omniverse, on a crimson and blue ruler, a certain legion retreated, as 11 were surrounding a single visage of an Imperium knight, whose expression was becoming worse and worse. Augustus, hang in there. We will arrive in Cappadocia soon and obtain help. Besides the handsome yet heavily injured figure of Imperium Knight Augustus, a female Imperium Knight looked at him with concern and care. Her silver-gold hair and eyes were reddened with anger and a small sense of fear, as they hadn't recently come across a heavy attack like this. The devilish face and smile branded on the forehead of Augustus and two others, seeming very menacing at this moment. Facing the weight of something he couldn't even understand, Augustus looked at the companion showing the most care as he was about to muster up a slight smile to let her feel at ease when... Crack! Augustus' forehead split open and caved in. A heavy and unstoppable process fully began. Robbed honor and glory become commonplace, their process undeniable once in place. Chapter 3001, merely the teleos stage, 1. Sowing the blooming scene, the silver-gold-haired Imperium Knight became dazed as she saw the engulfing crack spread across the forehead of Augustus and cave downwards, his life force and the life force she and others released being devoured at a shocking pace, disappearing towards oblivion. In Imperium legions, most of the time was spent training and on missions, as a lot of the time, complex weavings form between the knights within these legions. Emotional entanglements, eons of history and rapport. To some, the existence of the other being becomes critical to their mental support. The beautiful visage of the silver-gold-haired female knight held a relationship close to this with Augustus, as seeing his handsome face becoming caved in under pressure while his dominium soul crack! She released a wailing bellow as she saw his dominium soul crack. Even as multicolored tendrils of life force flowed from the dominiums of her, Knight Palmino, Knight Acalusia, and many others, they couldn't stabilize and patch up Augustus any longer. He had been analyzed too greatly. The damage he could receive was that much more compared to before, as his dominium could not hold it. And with the advent of a single line of a new prophecy, no Imperium Knight shall fall. Hold. The gaze of Knight Palmino was utterly furious, as his body erupted with the wondrous glow of the Imperium. His eyes maddened as the hands of Knight Acalusia came to move him back. She then went forward with the dazzling Codex of Extremity in her hands, as she sought to even summon the influence of the omniverse around her. But before this could fully unfold, boom! The cracked dominion became interminably unstable, as instead of accepting the life force of the Imperium Knights around it began releasing a gluttonous devouring force that tried to ensnare itself on all those around Augustus. It even pulled towards the weavings of the Codex of Extremity in the hands of Acalusia. Seeing such a scene, Acalusia gritted her teeth and closed the dazzling book in her hands, a heavy, repulsive authority being released from her that shook away all knights in the surroundings and pushed them all opposite of Knight Augustus. Knight Augustus that at this moment, with his dominium caving in from an unbearable pressure and his face splintered and folded itself, turned to look towards the silver-gold-haired female knight in a daze, until a moment later, Boom! An existential boom akin to a vanquished existential singularity bloomed. It was blood-red gold as after its emergence, it collapsed into itself as everything became devoured and disappeared into oblivion right after. Robbed honor and glory become commonplace, their process undeniable once in place. Their process was undeniable once in place. In real time, a prophecy began to apply its corrective measures with shocking accuracy and precision. The knights gazed forward with dazed expressions, Knight Palmino's expression seeming utterly ugly as every part of his body trembled. On his forehead, he could feel the devilish smile and eyes trying to fully return and establish themselves, while on two other knights, their loot markers became much brighter and potent at this moment.
No! No!
The silver gold-haired companion of Knight Augustus wailed in a guttural howl that stretched out all around, her intent entirely sorrowful as seeing her gaze and the gaze of other knights. Acalucia couldn't help but feel a surge of anger in her heart. She knew the culprit, the one who had thrown the arrows, the one they were seeking in the beginning. With her molars grinding in her jaws, she called out his name. Noah, Osman! His name acted like a trigger on all dazed knights here. Palmino seemed like a raging bull, as feeling the mark on his forehead, and two others seeking to become ever brighter, he bellowed out, "To Cappadocia, now!" Before any other situation occurred, before anything else worsened. They had to go, as at the same time, they were feeling from the reality of something unbelievable. The loss of the dominium soul of a member of their Red Legion. A legion being trained to face omniversal pillagers. Today, Knight Augustus fell. Attilio's stage entity fell. And his enemy was one who had just stepped into the existential dominion realm in the last few hours. His enemy was the unbearable weight of a construct that nobody truly understood at this moment. But one way or another, it paved the way for a reality that would only act as a springboard for a certain someone, expanding the actions he could take in a way others could not even fathom. An unfathomable achievement. The authority of the protagonist rises ever further. The dominium soul of a Teleo stage knight has been shattered by your means and the means of your infinite existential omniversal seed. Swathes of immense records, extremes, and existence are flowing into you. Your forge multiplies the quality and quantity of all incoming weavings and transforms them into quintessential fruits of existence. Your primordium core devours the quintessential fruits of existence and becomes even more enriched. An unbelievable reality. One that stated that somehow Noah had managed to cause the demise of a Teleo stage entity. But this alone held such tremendous meaning as it wasn't all just for the loot. There was also something equally important that began to unwind in front of Noah's body at this moment. The existential illusory weaving one of Augustus began to shine with brilliance. The records, extremes, and existence of Knight Augustus is fully analyzed and understood. The existential illusory weaving of the Knight Augustus began to form. Hume! The aura of a Teleo stage entity began to rise and flourish. Endless waves of mana dynamics surged in and fused towards its forming body. Tendrils of the protagonist and loot flowed into it with wonder. A breath of quintessence, infinity, extremity, and tyranny ran rampant and seethed within its existence. With a dazzlingly handsome appearance, adorned in a set of blue-gold knight armament, it was an existential illusory weaving. It was a Teleo stage existence. Chapter 3002, merely the Teleo stage, 2. What a glorious thing. Hours after this advance into the existential dominium realm, he went ahead and utilized his infinite existential omniversal seed to entirely skip over the neonate, Sequor, and Teleo stages as an entity of such a realm was slain. Floating above his throne, Noah took a moment to take the gravitas of such an action, of such an achievement. And all he could say for it, merely the Teleo stage, nothing much.
Wah!
Merely the Teleo stage. He skipped to slay an entity of such a stage, and when it came to him, he didn't just leave them at that. He first devoured their eons worth of hard work. And he then put records of what they used to be at work as at this moment, the dazzling illusory figure of an Imperium Knight was actualized, a sentient light flowing within his eyes. The moment this light came to, his will became focused on the man before his eyes, as in a swift motion. The illusory weaving of the handsome visage of Knight Augustus came to bend down and kneel before Noah, The intent was thick and powerful. Even at this point, waves of heavy existential extremity authorities from Noah and the infinite existential omniversal seed continued to fill up this illusory weaving in front of Noah, as its realm was far too high. Its breadth was immeasurably wide. The existential extremity authority of royalty can be redesigned under the illusory weaving of Knight Augustus and brought to the existential level under it. The extremity authority of honor can be redesigned under the illusory weaving of Knight Augustus and brought to the existential level under it. The extremity authority of dignity can be redesigned as illusory weaving of Knight Augustus and brought to the existential level under it. An array of prompts arose. Towards the kneeling Imperium Knight paying obeisance to him, Noah gazed at him calmly, as this was a tool that allowed many more things to become possible. To start off, there are some who chose to be my enemies, legacies that thought themselves far above all else.
Wah!
The moment these words rose, the illusory weaving of the Imperium Knight Augustus rose along with them as his intent burst out. The enemies of the Master deserve nothing else but a swift conversion to become loot. A sound intent. Noah smiled at it and nodded as he gave out his command. The legacies of Al-Abalim and Ignatius still exist. Wipe them out silently and efficiently. Basilius Anane can be spared due to her prior actions. As of this moment, you will take the lead as the commander of my illusory legion. Illusory Commander Augustus. Existential authority seethed. The newly appointed illusory commander became even more servile as he bowed ever deeper. I heed the Master's commands, with existential authority still flowing into him like an endless sea. With a body that other entities could not even see, an invisible Imperium Knight disappeared, and more prompts cascaded over Noah's eyes. The action of decimating the dominium of a Teleos stage existential dominium realm entity is not a light one. Apart from all of his records, existence, and extremes being funneled to become amplified authority to be converted to quintessential fruits of existence, you have attained a quintessential dominium core that can be utilized to stimulate the formation of an entity's dominium. A magisterial singularity began to form within Noah's forge. It was a loot so blinding that the extremity of cheats gazes at the newly appearing loot with anticipation and an itch to alter. Some of Noah's extremes began to lock onto the wonder continuing to bloom around Noah, within the existential domain of Cappadocia. As one of the central domains under the banner of the Imperium, it was something unique and not akin to the existential domains where seeds were cultivated over eons. Forces of the Imperium moved to and fro in many places here, with there being designations of planes of existence where certain enclaves occupied, and some of the more potent branches of legacies even had their own designated planes where their basileus were stationed. And then there were general areas where the basileus of different legacies mixed in along with others of the Imperium, in a plane of existence filled with vibrant blue galaxies. Atop a central point of the largest galaxy, a massive construct surrounded by vessels going back and forth, and even many more parked in place could be seen. The construct was circular in nature, seeming like a disk of blue light that had countless grand structures and buildings atop it. Among these many structures, there was a famous one known as the Pearl of Cappadocia, where many legacies, enclaves, and other forces gathered for entertainment and to soothe one's weary dominion through many methods. The Pearl of Cappadocia was a massive structure designed like a ship, and it floated on a stellar cloud of stars as it had multiple layers and floors. On the 899th floor of the Pearl of Cappadocia, attendants floated on a gold sea of dazzling light, carrying with them trays that held refined drinks made from fruits of existence. There were wide golden tables rising from the gold sea below that were occupied by many powerful entities at the existential dominium realm, many of them belonging to enclaves or legacies as they mingled and discussed amongst each other. On a particular table, the visage of Basilius Anine could be seen with many other Basilius of the legacy of Al-Abalim, and unlike the cheery gazes of other entities across the floors of the Pearl of Cappadocia, their gazes were dark. Every now and then, gazes would be thrown their way as the discussions taking place were all the same, talking of the downfall of Al-Abalim and Ignatius as the events of Vitalis and Vacuus spread. in a corner of this unique space, belonging to a powerful entity that used to hold some of the highest rights to Cappadocia. An entity silently appeared as his visit was not visible to any others. It was the arrival of a soldier, a commander sent forth by a man who always remembered cause and effect. Chapter 3003, Attacks on Cappadocia. 1. Being the illusory weaving of Knight Augustus, the illusory commander Augustus knew very well all the protective measures within Cappadocia and how to bypass them. All he did afterward was remain with his innate weaving of not even being visible in existence to other entities and overseeing authorities. And then, he followed the weavings of his master to arrive at those whose extremes and records he was entangled with. Silently, he observed the remnant forces of the legacy of Al-Abalam on the 899th floor of the Pearl of Cappadocia around a luxurious golden table where drinks made of fruits of existence flowed within golden chalices. Only Basilius Anain and other members of the legacy of Al-Abalam were here, with the Archon Basilius Al-Abalam himself not being present. But the illusory commander Augustus was not worried about this. A man had to start somewhere, and when he moved, he had to guarantee results. He closed his eyes as he remained invisible while surrounded by swathes of Basilius from different legacies and enclaves, most being in the Sequor stage of existential dominium realm, as the second most common was the lowest neonate stage, and there were a few prominent heads of Teleo stage on the leading seats of some clusters. The moment a move was made, an exit had to be made right after. The illusory commander Augustus closed his eyes at this moment as he felt the weavings of his master. Within the great stretches of Cappadocia, he could sense the few knights affected by the loot marker and the observer they dragged along with them. The intent of his master's prophecy rang in his mind as he sensed the progression of these marks. Robbed honor and glory become commonplace, their process undeniable once in place. The process was undeniable. His former self had met the inevitable fate as he was reborn under a grand new light under the glory of the Weaver of Extremity. He could feel that even with the help they came to Cappadocia to seek, another Teleos stage brethren would be joining him soon enough. But the power of the Imperium clustered here. There were those who could still reverse the terrifying power of his master, Lightsville M. So the illusory commander Augustus waited patiently to strike, at the most opportune time. While waiting, come forth to aid in accomplishing the commands of the master. His weavings traversed across space and time to reach the illusory weavings of neonate stage Basilius. His master had already killed those who joined the ranks of his master first, but he now led. All of them would answer his call, as the result of their mission was to grow the numbers of their legion even more. But since they couldn't hide as well as him at his current stage, their mission would be elsewhere. There was also the vacuous side of entities, the side where his master had granted additional advice due to the complex weavings of the great usurper mixed in with these forces. Within Cappadocia, in a restricted area filled with gloriously pulsing seas of existential authority, the auras of powerful entities in the Sequor and Teleos stage could be felt as they belonged to the powerful legions stationed within Cappadocia. With the eyes of many knights currently gazing towards the existential Panacea Sea, where one of the prized Imperium Knight healers could be seen. The existential Panacea Sea was verdant gold and filled with an overabundance of life, and a massive willow tree rose from its very depths as some of its many branches were currently wrapped around 3 Imperium Knights and the Royal Observer Xavier. The figures of Knight Palmino and Acalusia were standing in front of this massive tree as within moments, a terrifying aura far exceeding the Teleos stage of existential dominium realm appeared in the surroundings. It was the appearance of an aged man with white gold hair and a pair of glasses, his demeanor of an old man entirely destroyed by his absolutely shocking might. It was the Imperium Marshal King overseeing many of the operations of the existential domain of Cappadocia. The moment he arrived, Knight Acalusia and Knight Palmino bowed down along with the rest of the knights in the surroundings. But the gaze of the Marshal King wasn't even on them, as he was locked onto the 3 Imperium Knights and the Observer Xavier. His eyes instantly lit up with wrath as he saw the looks of agony on the Imperium Knights, who were getting their dominiums actively devoured. the efforts of the massive tree and its massive life force behind them, not even being able to help. Then he also saw the visage of the royal observer, who had his face split and caved in the middle already, the rest of his body seemingly about to follow. As when the Imperium Martial King appeared, Xavier and the others adopted looks of great hope, their hands reaching out to be saved. They all wanted to be saved. But looking at their state, the Martial King instantly moved his body towards the three Imperium Knights, as observer Xavier instantly despaired, the wavering of his intent instantly becoming critical as his dominium instantly began fracturing and caving into itself, the cackling of the devilish smile and eyes on his forehead flaring victoriously. It seemed like the ultimate insult before these Imperium Knights as their dominiums buzzed, with the might of the Martial King erupting on his aged body as his hands descended on the first two knights who were branded. Blinding light erupting out and beginning to erase these brandings as the authority seemed undeniable. Those who would be saved, and those who would perish as the protagonist prophesied would perish. But at such a moment, when one of the major powerhouses within Cappadocia was making a move to resolve an issue, and while many eyes were drawn towards the return of the Red Legion and the death of an Imperium Knight, an illusory commander made a move. Chapter 3004. Attacks on Cappadocia. A sect. On the 899th floor of the Pearl of Cappadocia, Basilius Anine was sitting at the head of a dazzling golden table, wondering how eons worth of calculations had come crashing down so spectacularly. In the midst of her thoughts, in the midst of her weavings, she felt her silver-white hair flicker and weave as if a heavy wind was whipping all around her. Her head rose in confusion as an instant later, her eyes were only able to capture a flash of brilliance she had seen once before. This light of brilliance was already on the heads of all Basilius of Al-Abalum apart from her. Lights fell, and some of its tendrils were colorless, others an endless blue, and others shining a brilliant hue of purple. But she could have sworn that she had seen this light before. The moment this thought came, her eyes were only just able to capture the implosion and fracturing of the bodies and dominium souls of all the Basilius of Abalum around her. All of them were either at the neonate or sequor stage of existential dominium realm, and even Anine could say that the brilliance of the authorities raging around her made me no less brilliant, if not exceeding her father. It meant this was someone at the Teleos stage, and a tremendously powerful one at that, as the moment an instant passed, a few dozen dominions were instantly crushed. Basilius Anine rose up in shock as around her, exclamations and bellows rose from nearby as a great number of existential authorities erupted out. Countless intents overlapped, but no enemy could be seen. The only thing apparent was the lone figure of Basilius Anine. She was frozen in place with her authorities buzzing, preparing to fight for her own life, but nothing else came. No enemy could be seen, even as powerful royalties of the Imperium rose around and spread their dominiums out in shock, and far from the Pearl of Cappadocia. In another region within the haven of Cappadocia, the figure of Archon Basilius Ignatius was meeting with the veiled Herald of Flames, the right-hand woman of the Archon Basilius Lithith, as she was smiling while enacting different plans. Under Al-Abalum, you lost everything, so why would you not join our cause? My Archon has great ambitions. Her weavings were enticing as Ignatius had a difficult expression, and just when he was about to reply, his gaze changed as he turned around and bellowed out.
You!
He bellowed out behind him where the few dozen remaining Basilius of his legacy remained, and he sensed the invisible enemies he had come across before instantly appearing around his forces and striking out. All of the illusory weavings were of the neonate stage, as they couldn't escape the gazes of Teleos stage entities. The dominium soul of Archon Basilius Ignatius instantly erupted to defend in anger, the veiled Herald of Flames also standing up with sternness. But before she could even move, her pupils widely dilated in the next moment, as in the corner of her eyes, she saw the erupting image of Ignatius, who was radiating his dominium in the distance. She saw his face caving in and nearly being destroyed as a silent and invisible attacker of much greater power than the ones they could currently sense in the distance attacked. The illusory commander Augustus had warped through the weavings of Cappadocia, through the prepared legions of illusory weavings of Basilius, instantly appearing in this space as it judged the best entity that could fall to him at the Teleos stage. The answer turned out to be Ignatius. Boom! A heavy battle broke out here, as at this moment, a single entity in the distance was the one benefiting from all of this. Far away from the attacks being carried out in Cappadocia, adorned in his sleek white dress and obsidian pants, Noah's dominium soul reflected the vision of what his main body saw, a scene of wondrous prompts since another Teleos stage entity fell to his whims. Another dominium soul of a Teleos stage entity has been shattered by your means and the means of your infinite existential omniversal seed. Swathes of immense records, extremes in existence are flowing into you. The records, extremes, and existence of Observer Xavier are fully analyzed and understood. The existential illusory weaving free Observer Xavier has begun to form. The records, extremes, and existence Basilius Lorraine are fully analyzed and understood. The existential illusory weaving V3 Basilius Lorraine has begun to form. One after another, Teleos stage illusory weaving joined his ranks. Many more at the Sequor and Teleos stage followed. As for his advent into the larger Omniverse now, he was truly giving the Imperium a warm welcome. But at the same time, amidst all of these gains, there were also some losses. Losses like Noah feeling the permanent erasure of his loot marker on the 3 remaining nights. Losses that told him that even though his prophecies were powerful and applied great existential corrective measures, they could also be opposed when a great power stood opposite them. But it didn't matter. His silent legions moved quickly, as he even expected an Archon to quickly join his ranks. The seas of existential authority that had just converged to support the illusory weaving of the Royal Observer Xavier, already being warped away to appear within the distant battle against Archon Basilius Ignatius. Because this battle had to be quick to ensure a clean destruction of an Archon's dominion, and the subsequent retreat before terrifying forces of the Imperium got a hold of his legions. Amongst those being destroyed in the legacy of Ignatius, the illusory weavings under Commander Augustus purposely avoided a few Basilius, similar to how Basilius Anin was left untouched. These Basilius showing with their eyes a deeply hiding flow of blue tendrils of light that belonged to none other than the great usurper. For these entities, Noah left alone as to him, attacking them would be akin to kill stealing, and there were plenty of fish in the vast Omniverse. Chapter 3005, Enemy of the Imperium. 1. As a fisherman harvested his gains from afar, the Imperium Marshal King of Cappadocia was aflame with anger. This was a simple mission. His hand lifted from the stable visage of Knight Palmino, as his aged gaze hung onto him, and Knight Acalusia closely. The loot markers were entirely erased from the foreheads of the remaining knights with the shocking power of the Imperium Marshal King. But 2 forces of the Imperium had fallen nonetheless. An observer and a knight. A knight stemming from a trainee Red Legion that was being trained to succeed one of the genuine Red Legions of the Imperium to fight against omniversal pillagers. How could one fall so easily in front of the willow tree full of an overabundance of existential life force? In the surroundings, the existential Panacea Sea shone with a splendorous green-gold light that reflected on the many knights observing respectfully in the distance, and the Red Legion that at this moment dropped to their knees towards the Imperium Marshal King. Imperium Knights Acalusia and Palmino were included among them, as Acalusia offered her Codex of Extremity while kneeling and voicing out her intent. The cause of failure was all on me, Marshal King. The offering of the Codex of Extremity from the hands of the Knight Commander was extremely symbolic, as more often than not, it was them relinquishing command and asking to be punished. To any other knight offering such a symbolic action, it may have gone through. But for Imperium Knight Acalusia, bah! Get up! Tell me what happened. The Marshal King sighed wryly as if he were looking at his very own flesh and blood, the identity of Acalusia being extremely special. Her gold locks of her brimmed with power as her immeasurably gorgeous visage remained kneeling while replying. We tracked Noah Osmont and discovered a Sanctus princess without her entourage, just a single knight. During our battle with them, we were faced with attacks that were the ones to cause our losses. And I have high confidence that the source of these attacks is this same Noah Osmont. Her words were filled with confidence, as if what she said could be nothing but the truth. The Imperium Martial King heard this name mentioned once more as his body pulsed with shocking waves of power. Eons worth of accumulation seemed to be contained in his eyes as he muttered calmly, Noah Osmont. The name reverberated out across the golden green sea around them, filled with an overabundance of light. The Knights of the Red Legion still kneeling as they waited for the verdict of the Martial King. He will no longer be regarded as a seed, and the mystery of his background can be affixed to the Sanctus Populi. Whom? The surrounding weavings of existence trembled at his words alone, as the flames of rage within Knight Palmino were fed freely and growing ever more. The aged visage of the Imperium Martial King was suffused with a golden light as he continued. Place his name and everything to do with his weavings as an enemy of the Imperium. The reward for his existential capture or death is currently set as either a number of shares from the Cappadocia Enclave or a not yet defined number of fruits of existence. The gaze of the Martial King became piercing, as if he could see the strung-up existence of the one known as Noah Osmont right before him already. Cappadocia shall declare an existential crusade against this Noah Osmont, as any legion will be welcome, and you can destroy anything in your path to him, whether it be the Sanctus Populi or something else. Ho! The Knights of the Imperium in the surroundings smacked their chests and kneeled to give their affirmation. Ho! Knight Palmino and Acalucia used their hands to smack their chests and chant in affirmation. Ho! It was the call of the existential crusade of Noah Osmont, someone who dared to murder the Knights of the Imperium. But before this moment could be taken in all that fully, the gaze of the Martial King flickered as he disappeared in a wisp of golden light right away. When he reappeared, he was already within the 899th floor of the Pearl of Cappadocia, gazing at the unfolding chaos of multiple basileus with their dominiums shattered and broken, and no enemy who did so in sight. The gaze of the Martial King twinkled as he waved his hand, his aura spreading out as all the chaos around calmed. Basileus of legacies and enclaves calmed and looked forward respectfully as the Martial King twisted his hand, the weavings of records and existence seemingly flowing in reverse as in moments. The shattered bodies of the Basileus reformed in an illusory manner. Even Basileus Anine watched as an illusory version of herself came to sit back down on her seat right before the attack. The scene paused. The hand of the Martial King burned with a golden light, as before the Basileus died an instant later within the scene. His golden light came down to bathe over everything as a moment later. Another figure was highlighted. Shockingly, he stood right behind Basileus Anine when he attacked, and yet she was left untouched. But his sword moved out with multiple existential extremity authorities as he cut down all Sequor and neonate stage Basileus of Al-Abalin, not including Basileus Anine. Most astonishing of all was when the eyes of the Martial King and others in the surroundings landed on the visage of this attacker. He was shining with a transparent light, but that face, that likeness, was that not Knight Augustus? The pupils of the golden-haired Martial King pulsed as he knew this was one of the knights to fall under the same being he had just released an existential crusade against. His death was confirmed. Now his weavings were being used to wipe out Basileus of the Imperium? In his Cappadocia, while he himself was here? Hum! The surroundings trembled, and the Martial King uttered out in a heavy tone. Noah Osmont! The name was uttered out again. It would be uttered many times in the near future, and each time the intent around it would be starkly different. Chapter 3006, Enemy of the Imperium. 2. The illusory figure of the long-dead Knight August was observed by the Imperium Martial King as golden tendrils of light flashed with his eyes. Utilizing the death weavings of his knights to carry out such brazen attacks in his home, this Osmont continued to spit on the honor of the Imperium freely, as after the Martial King viewed the past weavings of existence with his own terrifying existential extremity authority, he turned his eyes towards the only Basileus of Al-Abalum to survive this brazen attack. As he spoke, He waved his hands and caused space to fluctuate as the visage of the silver-haired Archon Basilius al-Abalam appeared. This entity having been in a meeting with the Martial King regarding the loss of the existential domain he managed before things turned chaotic. The moment al-Abalam arrived, his eyes shook at the scene of blood of his legacy, and the visage of Basilius Anine alone, as the first words he heard thereafter were from the Martial King, addressing Basilius Anine. Why were you the only one not targeted? Why did Osmont leave you behind? There was a lot to unpack from the two questions, especially if you were Archon Basilius al-Abalam, who just arrived and saw nearly all of your people dead. These two questions first stipulated the ridiculous idea that somehow the Seed Noah Osmont was involved in this, and that all of this had occurred, with his daughter being the only one he didn't slaughter. And now the Imperium Martial King was gazing at her coldly and seeking an answer. Her vibrant face paled under such pressure as even before she could answer, the gaze of the Imperium Martial King flashed again, even greater anger being seen within his eyes before he disappeared again. He was disappearing and reappearing quite a lot in the past few minutes as he left everything behind, the eyes of al-Abalam blazing as they questioningly looked at Basilius Anine. As for where the Martial King has disappeared to, in an entirely different region within Cappadocia, the aged Martial King appeared amidst a roiling sea of carnage, the figures of those from the legacy of Ignatius lying dead with their dominions shattered, stellar blood filled with the weavings of existence flowing freely, as if a dense number of planes of existence had perished. The most shocking thing was the visage of Archon Basilius Ignatius, who was now staring blankly forward, his body cleaved by an existential light of apocalypse, as his Teleos stage dominion was collapsing in itself and experiencing an end. The owner of this light faded just as the Martial King appeared, with this aged man roaring out and swinging his hand as wondrously, a manifestation of a golden hand cleaving down formed above the plains of Cappadocia. This golden hand even shockingly reflected outside of the auroras of blue and red of this existential domain, as if it could cleave entire existential domains themselves. It struck out towards the spot where the enemy who had just struck down Archon Basilius Ignatius disappeared into, flowing. It's the crevice of records, extremes, and existence, even though the enemy was no longer there. That was the last action the Martial King committed before his rage calmed and later lightning. As for whether he managed to hit anything, nobody knew at this point. He looked around at the lifeless dominion of the past Archon Basilius, and then also saw how there were a few Basilius from the legacy of Ignatius still left alive, most of them shocked and unable to comprehend what just occurred before them. Why were they left alive? Did the enemy simply run out of time? How was this connected to Basilius Anine being left alive on the side of al-Abalam? Such inquisitive questions rang out in the mind of the Imperium Martial King, as before he could begin his investigations. Shah! A figure of another aged-old man with white gold hair appeared while yawning, gazing at the lifeless dominions around as he asked lazily, "Who's causing all this ruckus, Repariel?" I'm at a critical point, grasping that feisty omniversal authority. The old man's voice was heavy and suffocating as it emanated towards the active Martial King Repariel. Martial King Repariel turned towards this newly appearing aged old man, who seemed to also be in his prime, just like him, his angered chest falling as he spoke calmly, while beginning to reverse the weavings of this location. A new enemy of the Imperium. He was an apparent seed just in the last few weeks, and yet as of today, he had butchered Teleos stage knights and an Archon Basilius. Oh. The laziness in the eyes of this aged entity faded at such words, especially at the words of an Archon Basilius. This was because his identity was also that of an Archon Basilius, but one of the more powerful ones across the Imperium that ruled over many, many existential domains. Archon Basilius Alderaan, leader of the legacy of Alderaan that was etched deeply into the Imperium. He stroked his white gold beard as his golden robe shimmered, his intent echoing out. Interesting. So either an old fool hiding his identity and playing tricks, or an anomaly, or someone with a unique omniversal destiny cutting apart everything in his path. How are you planning on handling it? A flicker of interest had risen in the eyes of Archon Basilius Alderaan. The pressure of his eyes alone could grind thousands of Teleos stage entities to dust, and yet he was showing interest in this issue. Marshal King Rapiriel raised his brows, his eyes shining as he replied. I was going to leave it to Imperium legions and legacies to hunt him down, but it seems you have another thought. Archon Basilius Alderon smiled with a deep cunning light as he continued. We haven't gone hunting ourselves in quite a while, yes? Why don't we also join in, ensure that we aren't just sending nutrients to this anomaly we don't know much about? We can just go and nip everything in the bud before things start to bloom, and the kid may even hold surprises. Imperium observers, Imperium knights, Imperium martial kings. These were the set stages of status within the Imperium, as when it came to Archon Basilius, it wasn't set. Most were at the same level or status as knights, and then there were Archon Basilius, whom even martial kings had to consider as peers or pay respects to them. The newly appearing Archon Basilius Alderon was one such being, as hearing his words, the martial king Rapiriel had his eyes shining with an inquisitive light before even he gave a nod of agreement. Chapter 3007, Enemy of the Imperium. A third. A martial king was not an entity to be looked down upon, nor was an Archon Basilius who oversaw dozens or hundreds of existential domains. Such entities enjoyed vast swathes of wealth and resources that allowed them to be where they were today, to further maintain such a state by only getting more powerful. They were entities who weren't just touching upon influencing the semblance of omniversal authorities, but they were actually studying them and how to utilize them in greatly altering their extreme existence. Imperium Martial King Rapiriel and Archon Basilius Alderon. The first thing these entities did in the location where an Archon Basilius had perished was to collect all of those that had survived, as an investigation had to be carried out. The weavings of existence and extremes flashed as dominiums were warped here and there. And after 3 minutes passed, all right, now we have all relevant parties here. In a golden hall with a single throne at its very end, towards the very center of Cappadocia, it was within a plane of existence that the martial king took as one of his abodes. Currently, the figures of Basilius Anine, Archon Basilius Al-Abalem, the remaining Basilius of Ignatius, and even the veiled Herald of Flames, Archon Basilius Lithe, were all warped to this location. Imperium Knights Acalusia, Palmino, and many others could be seen lining up this hall as in front of the throne. The martial king stood beside Archon Basilius Alderon as he locked on to Basilius Anine, his fingers tapping out. I have no patience to go back and forth with you all, so just do not resist while I read through your records. The most shocking thing one entity could do to another. The reading of the records contained within their dominium, as they would have to leave everything bare for another person to do that. Basilius Anine gritted her teeth, but she couldn't really deny a martial king when she was merely in the Sequor stage, and this entity far exceeded the Teleos stage. The golden light came to bathe over her dominion, and only a second passed. Thereafter, the martial king harumphed as a heavy pressure cascaded down, Basilius Anine's knees sinking into the floor as golden blood gushed out of her mouth. Thereafter, the martial king said nothing as he tapped his finger towards Al-Abalem and the remaining Basilius of Ignatius, and even the one that was meeting with Ignatius before he died, the veiled Herald of Flames. His will entered their dominiums as he perused through them feely, seeing a great deal of information before he let out another harump an instant later. The Basilius of Ignatius, and even Archon Basilius Lethe, and his right-hand woman, also falling to their knees while gushing out blood. Only Archon Basilius Al-Abalem was left alone standing. The martial king gazed at all those here with immense disappointment in his eyes, his intent weaving out while looking at those who merely bore his pressure. Scheming behind the scenes is one of the reasons we are all here today. This Anine had the chance to capture and eradicate Noah Osmont within the weavings of records. But she didn't take it so she could further her own insurrection against her father, while even working with Lethith to get her piece of the pie when things were done. Well now, you will be stripped of your position as Basilius, your dominium suppressed for the eons to come, as you will be sent to the Cappadocia existential mines. Spend your days unearthing singularities of existence. What do you weigh? His words first caused Al-Abalam to look at Basilius-Anain with incredulity, and the punishment was even more shocking. Cappadocia existential mines. What really made this existential domain special and required an Imperium Martial King to be here? Basilius-Anain gritted her teeth at such a verdict, but she wasn't the only one. The Martial King turned to stare at the remaining Basilius of Ignatius as his eyes flashed. I cannot sense what your fault is in all this, but if Osmont left you alive, you are connected to his weavings in some way. You all will spend the next few eons with your dominiums suppressed and in the Cappadocia existential mines. As he spoke, the Martial King tapped his fingers once more, causing Anain and the Basilius of Ignatius to disappear while their dominiums gained a shocking sense of suppression. Only the shocked visage of Al-Abalam and a few others remained while the Martial King continued to give out his verdicts. Lethith, for contributing in the rise of this Osmont, you will be reduced to overseeing a single existential domain as heavy words rang out one after another. Along with them, new possibilities arose. Within the depths of Cappadocia, molten blue and red mountains stretched out gloriously all around galaxies swirling within them, as at the base of these mountains, extremely hard and reinforced metalloid singularities seemed to make up the base of the mountain. Around this area, prisoners and miners were condemned to eons of work with their dominiums oppressed to a fundamental level. The Basilius of Ignatius and Anani appeared in such a place as in front of them. Imperium knights with whips as existential armaments could be seen, one immediately coming towards them to brief them on their new lives here. But of the transported Basilius of Ignatius, the one of the very center let out a laugh as tendrils of blue light began to fill his eyes, an old consciousness being rapidly erased and devoured as a new one settled in. From him, barely audible whispers could be heard. "Ha, a suppressed dominium for me to easily take over? Thank you for the gift, old friend." The voice of the great usurper, Noah Eckert, could barely be heard as his eyes radiated a blue light while rising to gaze at everything around him. The massive mountains made of singularities. At their base, many prisoners and miners with their dominiums suppressed could be seen. Some at the neonate stage, some at Seekworth, and some even at the teleos stage. In the body of a Basilius, the great usurper smiled as he seemed to have arrived at a paradise. There were so many suppressed meals just waiting for him to eat up. Chapter 3008. Merely the Dominium Realm. The tide of fate was unique, as one person's misery may just be another person's tremendous boon. While the great usurper experienced a tremendous boon in Cappadocia, far away from it, the extremity of the protagonist was calculating his own gains, while his Dominium soul was already following the lead of two entities towards another location. Before him, waves of existential authorities of his concepts swirled as he looked at the body of his illusory commander Augustus that was nearly cleaved in half, its dominium nearly shattered by the strike of someone who should have been the Martial King of Cappadocia. His body was already gone, with only a trace of his weavings remaining, but even this was utilized to nearly destroy the dominium soul of a teleos stage entity. Noah couldn't match up to such a being yet as he looked at everything else around him. While waves of authorities flowed into the illusory commander Augustus to heal his dominium, the kneeling body of the illusory weavings of the observer Xavier and even the Archon Basilius Ignatius could be seen. A total of 3 teleos stage entities, a past Archon, a knight, and a royal observer. These were currently Noah's most powerful forces, as under them, the other Basilius he had killed and looted joined their ranks to form his Dominium Stage Legion. These were his forces. But apart from these, he also had other vassals, and they could embark on the same glorious path as himself. He looked at the quintessential Dominion force he received with every death of the teleos stage entity, as he thought about his family and vassals, disappearing soon after from the restricted domain space in the depths of the infinite existential omniversal seed, and arriving near the rotating Alithian havens along the massive extremity vein of his construct. Towards the very peak of the extremity, the battle with the Nemesites had occurred. The vassals all remained as they acclimated to the quintessential gradations of extremity and the endless dominium sky that was out of reach far above. At this moment, Noah appeared amongst them. His aura was existence-defining. As the moment he arrived, the stellar rivers of essence in the surroundings began to coil with him, becoming the center as sparkling singularities bloomed and faded just from the sheer existential light around him. The primogenitor of steel and others turned to gaze at him with somber looks. Barbados and others smiled as they basked in his light. Dr. Hall, the Emperor Penguin, Hyperion, and Enders kneeled and bowed to pay their respects. The Sumerian architects Svetlana, Sargon, and Ishtar gazed forth with complex emotions and a sense of awe. Ayame, Erickson, and Lilith could only gaze from afar as they seemed to be thinking of the past. Noah appeared in such a place and became the absolute center of attention as he called out far ahead towards an entity that was already coming towards him. This body of his was currently adorned by a purple-gold emperor's robe as he seemed like an ancient Eonic king being paid respect by his people, his intent weaving out. With his call, the visage of Henry that was coming from afar instantly arrived before his father and tried to kneel. But Noah's hands grasped his shoulders and observed his son fully. At the 9th gradation of extremity, his body was surrounded by the existential extremity authority of destiny, an authority recorded in the creed of the existential omniversal emperor, as Noah himself could access it at any time and officially brand it into himself. Our lineage is one of excellence and quintessence. As he spoke, he waved his hands to reveal a deeply purple flower that seemed like it was made up of trillions of planes of existence glimmering like galaxies. It was the quintessential Dominium core that came from defeating a Teleo stage entity. Noah took such a thing and pushed it towards the chest of his son freely as his eyes began to tremble with emotion. Our creed is one that will stand out across the omniverse, so none of us can be weak. You, my son, cannot be weak. Around Henry Osmond, the extremity of nepotism vibrated and began to change, seething towards the existential level. If what was happening wasn't the ultimate form of nepotism, what was? The existence of the Son of Destiny buzzed as he felt the waters of the gradations of extremity getting extremely far away. His gaze turned up as he found he could catch a glimpse of an endless sky. Boom! At such a moment, his existence began to give off a different aura, of a step forward towards the primordium dominium realm. In the distance, others looked at this scene as the intent of the Weaver of Extremity blazed out. My creed is not one that excludes. Soon after our stabilization, we will begin the process of omniversal expansion, as all hands will be needed. Perform well, and boundless loot shall be yours. If you have my lineage, transcending the 9th gradation and entering the endless dominium skies is only a matter of time. Those who achieve it within the next day will attain the titles of quintessential commanders and be the leaders of my legions. W.A. His words caused his people's hearts to shudder and their souls to buzz. His words were extremely potent, as they were simply what the protagonist knew to be true from his own prophecy. To ends of existence to the beginnings of extremes, a pioneer rises that has never been seen. Legacies and enclaves are many in between, but which can stand against an omniversal engine, twist and turn again, until what is rare becomes all the same. Thinking of this, Noah turned towards his people and the 2 remaining quintessential dominium cores in his hands as he continued. My creed, the lineage of the existential omniversal emperor, will soon be mixing with forces that have lived for eons. Even if we have lived for decades or thousands of years, we cannot be any lesser. So burn with quintessence, reach the dominium skies, and form your dominium skies. Thereafter, an endless expanse awaits. The words of the protagonist rang out grandly. Tring! The bard of quintessence began to play a tune of melody and wonder as the people and the very infinite existential omniversal seed entered another stage. Chapter 3009, Sanctus Populi 1. The bard of quintessence put in some overtime. A tune of glory and wonder rang out within a section of the infinite existential omniversal seed, as the Son of Destiny was transforming his existence and stepping into the primordium stage of the existential dominium realm enacted by his father. Within his blood, there was a shocking lineage of immense purity, Lightsvel M, and such a lineage also flowed within them. Even if it weren't as pure, they could feel it. The bard of quintessence could feel it. There was a shocking amount of untapped potential flowing within them. And as they had this thought, their wills were drawn towards the existential force. This was because as his son transformed, Noah came to a point of his own transformation. The flow of all surrounding authorities seamlessly resonated with him at the very center, where it seemed they came alive with every breath he took. When Noah checked within his dominion, he was the reason. Devouring the eons worth of loot light of multiple neonate, Sequor, and Teleos stage entities after he amplified it all, was enough to bring him towards the peak of his primordium stage of existential dominium realm. The primordium sky has almost been scaled. The corrective effect on the existential extremity authorities currently present within your dominium has begun to be actively displayed. You are raising all three aspects of your existence harmoniously and with immaculate balance, allowing for the corrective effect on your existential extremity authorities to be even more profound. Your extremes are becoming more capable of altering the existence around you, with less of a cost on your resources. The unknown weavings of your primordium core are slowly coming to fruition. To completely scale the primordium sky, nearly 10 times the amount of resources are required compared to the resources it took to arrive at the precipice. Even more information flowed into him. If he was about to finish scaling the primordium sky after devouring and assimilating thousands of quintessential fruits of existence from his enemies, where would he be ranked? With the tremendous amount of resources required for completion, would he be comparable to peak Sequor stage, or could he even compare to a Teleos stage entity? There was still much to learn and analyze as Noah smiled. To him, everything was perfectly normal, but to those in the surroundings, his aura was becoming even more unfathomable, as just with his presence alone, they felt their own extremes flowing based on him as they sought to converge only on his dominium sky. You don't have a lot of questions regarding who I am and exactly where we are going? A sonorous voice rang out. At times, it was said that one could hear the beauty of someone just from their voice alone. This entity only furthered this stereotype, as with her verdant hair shining brilliantly, the Sanctus Princess Emiliana was following a unique weaving of existence that was built of dignity. In front of her, the Dragon Knight Alder had a stern expression, as he seemed to be following the very extreme weavings of dignity towards a certain location. Beside her, Noah in his sleek suit was studying this mode of transportation closely, as it relied on traversing across an extreme and going towards its source, the source of the extremity of dignity. This was much more interesting to Noah than the weavings he had already uncovered of Emiliana, as he replied calmly. I will learn what I need to learn in due time, but I do hold curiosity about where exactly the Sanctus Populi is. The whole Omniverse is covered under the glory of the Imperium, so where exactly and how exactly could one hide from their gaze over the eons? His words and deep voice also furthered the stereotype of a handsome man behind a confident voice. As towards this, Emiliana's eyes flashed while she shook her head. No, not every part of this Omniverse is covered by the vile light of the Imperium. Oh? Noah raised his brows as Emiliana pointed ahead towards the pulsing light of dignity. The Imperium has carved out a great deal of this Omniverse, but they alone do not have the power to do that. And even if it is in points of existence under their vile light, those powerful enough can live under the light and shadows of a single existential extreme that had been elevated so much to become intricately linked to the Omniverse. In this case, we are going towards the sanctum of dignity. Living inside of an existential extreme. What did such a thing even mean? Accessible by those granted the specific rights of dignity, nobody else can enter unless led through by both a knight and a Sanctus Princess. Unless someone with certifiably grander dignity possibly forces their way in. But in this Omniverse, who else can have higher dignity than the Sanctus Populi, than the Dragon Knights protecting the will of the people across it? As she spoke, the blinding golden light around them seemed to reach an apex. A singularity of dignity bloomed in front of them, and their figures warped entirely into it as they delved towards the source of the existential extremity of dignity. They reappeared within the sanctum of dignity. Welcome. With her verdant hair gaining a golden sheen, with Dragon Knight's expression easing as if he were finally in a safe space. The Sanctum of Dignity, one of the core locations of Sanctus Populi, and where we can have you undergo verification. If you can successfully become a Dragon Knight, you can attain even more knowledge, and boom, an unimaginably heavy impact ricocheted ahead of them. The surroundings were only just unfolding before Noah, and yet an impact of power that caused his Dominium soul to feel a great sense of oppression rang out, far exceeding the Teleos stage, bathed with an intense light of dignity. Far ahead, 9 massive statues of dragons could be seen as they glowed with a cosmic light, and at this moment, the figure of a powerful entity far exceeding the Teleos stage smashed onto the wing of one of the 9 dragons. The auras of many entities of the existential Dominium realm actually watching in the surroundings as spectators. The gaze of Sanctus Princess Emiliana flickered as she seemed to understand what was going on instantly, a sigh escaping her lips as she waved Noah for them to also go forward. Chapter 30:10, Sanctus Populi. The 9 dragons each shone with a different color, the central one being bright gold and brimming with immense dignity. Each of them were the size of planes of existence, and behind these massive statues of dragons, clusters of thousands of planes of existence could be seen. Some contained in small points of singularities akin to grains of sand, some outwardly expressing their grand stature, and at the very center of the statues of 9 dragons, there was an equally titanic golden arena that looked much more like a colosseum. And this was the location where an entity exceeding the Teleos stage had been thrown out of to smash onto one of the dazzling statues of dragons. In the surroundings, entities in the forms of dragons or humans were abundant, as they all seemed to be observing what was occurring in shock, the identity of the being who was smashed onto the dragon statue being someone they all had to revere. Someone of much higher status than some Sanctus princesses. Emiliana's sigh became stern as she also realized this, her intent weaving out towards those far ahead to grasp just what had occurred. Moments later, a dragon knight appeared near them as they made their way over towards the massive golden arena, bowing towards Emiliana as he voiced out. Sanctus Princess, it seems your younger sister has angered the Elder Queen so much so that Elder Queen Ariana sought to discipline her. But this is the result. The rankings within the Sanctus Populi were simple. While the Imperium had observers, knights, and martial kings, the Sanctus Populi held knights who served under the Sanctus Princesses, and the Sanctus Princesses who answered to the Elder Queens. The power of Elder Queens was utterly terrifying, as they were at times equated to the martial kings of the Imperium, with all of them having begun influencing or grasping omniversal authorities one way or another. They all had long since exceeded the Teleos stage, as they had stepped on the Terracosm stage of the existential Dominium realm. Terracosm! One's Dominium would gain a heavy golden sheen at such a stage as the knight they wielded delved more so towards the Omniverse. And yet, an Elder Queen of the Terracosm stage currently had her visage imprinted on one of the 9 Sanctus dragons depicted within this endless stretch of the Sanctum of Dignity. The culprit was Sanctus Princess Emiliana's younger sister. A sister even she had difficulty with, as her power was something very few truly understood. Unfilial! Boom! A screech boomed out from the dragon statue at the center, as a beautiful older woman in her prime floated out, blazing golden flames wrapping around a unique Dominium origin as the existential extremity authority of dignity burned much too bright around her at this moment. Those at the Sequor stage couldn't even handle looking at her as she seemed like a burning sun, only those at the Teleos stage being able to glance at her figure without feeling their retinas burning. Noah's eyes brightly locked onto her as he felt a slight burning sensation, but he more so locked onto the target of this Elder Queen. A young woman who seemed to share some features with Sanctus Princess Emiliana could be seen at the very center of the vast golden arena, her expression calm and devoid of emotions, currently as her beauty far exceeded all others here. Her head held gorgeous locks of green and gold hair, her nose sharp as her eyes seemed capable of piercing the secrets of the Omniverse themselves. She had a single white-blue sword in her hands that coursed with liquefied dignity, and another existential extremity authority that seemed capable of freezing one's dominium at a glance. You won't take any dragon knights under you. You won't take any missions as a Sanctus princess. What good are you just staying here and wasting away? The roar of the Elder Queen boomed out as all of the surrounding weavings of existence seemed to be supporting her. Yet the gorgeous young woman on the golden arena didn't pay her any heed, the shocking sense of oppression bearing down on her actually being withstood as if it were nothing, and she flicked her sword up once again. The horrific power of the Elder Queen pressing down all around was actually cut through with such a simple stroke, existence becoming frozen as the Terracosm stage Elder Queen was smashed by an unseen force once more. Singularities of frost and utmost coldness exploding around her as she was flung back to the same impression she made before on the dragon statue. Silence reigned in the surroundings briefly before a billowing golden mass of power filled with wrath rose up from the indentation of the statue, the power of an enraged Terracosm stage entity about to run wild when at such a time. Elder Queen Ariana, please lessen you anger. The voice of Sanctus Princess Emiliana rang out. Her arrival was quickly caught by others as they paid respects, the men in the surroundings particularly paying their loyalty by bowing, as this was also part of the critical structure of the Sanctus Populi. Sanctus Princesses, Elder Queens, Sanctus Elder Queen Mother, Sanctus Empress. All positions were held by female entities as the men supported them as their knights. As Sanctus Princess Emiliana was acknowledged, the Elder Queen, who was actually getting whooped by her unruly younger sister, harumphed, her power gradually calming as her intent continued. Nobody else can talk sense into her. If you fail to do so too, I will fucking get the Empress involved if I have to. All this power, and what does she do with it? Useless. With a glimmer of light, the Elder Queen finished her words and disappeared. In her place was utter silence, as well as the nonchalant and calm figure in the arena holding an icy blue sword. Noah went on to stare at her as his dominium buzzed. Sanctus Princess Emiliana stared at her supposed younger sister as she held her own complex emotions. Just like her sister was also at the teleos stage of the existential dominium realm. And yet, she could freely battle against Terracosm stage entities as she was someone famous amongst the sanctum of dignity. Famous as one blessed by the Omniverse. Famous as one with great destiny, with a power so unique that others could not even compare. An omniversal genius. And yet, she also came with her own bundles and stacks of problems. Chapter 3011, Osmont's Proof of Dignity. 1. Strands of hair shining green and gold, her forehead holding a brilliant scripture of S that seemed like a beam of curved light, immense coldness emanating from it as it was pure white. The same white covered her icy blue blade, as it felt like her eyes were looking at everything with the same wavelength. As if the golden floor below her and the figures of dragon knights around her were one and the same. Not to say she thought herself above them. There wasn't even a sense of superiority in her eyes. Yet to her, it all just seemed the same. None of it seemed to matter. Sensing the Elder Queen that was bothering her gone, she was about to leave when a moment later, "Little sister." The voice of Sanctus Princess Emiliana buzzed in her ears, and she came to a stop as she turned back to see the figure of Emiliana, Dragon Knight Alder, and a new face come before her. She looked at each of them in turn, giving a nanosecond of a glance on each being, but uniquely, her gaze returned for a double take on the visage of Noah as she titled her head. She tilted her head akin to having a sense of confusion, and before she could clear up this confusion, "Little sister." The voice of Emiliana rang out again. "Hmm?" And this terrifying teleos stage entity who could seamlessly smack a Terracosm stage entity before them only turned towards Emiliana and nodded. Emiliana sighed as she waved her hands for the gathered dragon knights in this area to disperse, walking closer towards her younger sister as her voice echoed out. Eventually, the Elder Queen Mother will and even the Sanctus Empress may get involved. Can you not just give them a little bit of what they want, just to pacify them here and there? The words were tired and pleading ones, as if she had done this many times before. And she had truly done this far too many times before. The one before her was referred to as an omniversal genius. The terror of dignity. The day she was born, the Elder Queen Mother overseeing the source of dignity trembled and was injured, as this source was nearly automatically transferred over to her. She attained an existential extremity authority 24 hours after she was born, and attained the existential dominium realm a day later. She crossed the neonate, sequor, and teleos stages in the weeks that followed, only for her to remain in the teleos stage in the years that followed. Others speculated this was merely her choice, because even at that stage she could shockingly defeat Elder Queens at the Terracosm stage of the existential dominium realm. She was Sanctus Princess Sona, the terror of dignity, and also the sloth of dignity. Towards the words of Sanctus Princess Emiliana, Sona shook her head calmly as a barely audible intent leaked out from her. At the end, none of it will matter. Barely audible. Yet Emiliana and Dragon Knight Alder were calm as if they had heard this too many times. But Noah, he felt the weavings of his extremes buzzing as the flow of oraculum pulsed with an unknown resonance. Today, you defeat Elder Queen Ariana. Will you battle the Sanctus Elder Queen Mother next? The one who raised you and gave you everything you have? These words caused a sense of emotion to slowly come to the surface, but it was quickly ground down as Sanctus Princess Sona was about to shake her head again. But at this time, Sanctus Princess Emiliana's eyes shone with ingenuity as she turned to stare at Noah, a smile blooming on her face before she turned towards her sister once more. How about this? Do one thing to pacify them, and I can vouch for them to leave you alone for the next eon. Beway! These words caused the brows of Sanctus Princess Sona to rise. Unbothered for the next few eons, this was undoubtedly something sweet. Seeing the slight interest in her eyes, Emiliana pointed to Noah beside her and continued. I have someone here needing to undergo verification and a test of existential knighthood. I was going to do it, but how about you take my place? An idea bloomed as the moment she heard it. Sanctus Princess Sona soured as she shook her head, changing her mind. I said it before, and I will say it again. I will not take any knights under me, or anything of the sort. There was clear defiance and reasoning in her eyes as she was rejecting the idea right away, but Emiliana pressed on. Just a test of his knighthood. Nobody said anything about you taking him under your banner. You would have participated in one of our Sanctus rituals since you became a Sanctus Princess, and the Elder Queens have nothing to come bother you with, at least for the next eon. Silence reigned. The entity that was Sona squinted her eyes as she came to gaze at Noah calmly once more, with Noah returning the same calm energy she gave off as moments later. Sona sighed while waving her hands. All right, let's get it over with. The wheels of existence turned. A decision unfolded along with a new reality as Sanctus Princess Emiliana nodded, her visage rising up as her intent began to weave out to the masses that had begun to disperse. I will express how the ritual of Sanctus Knighthood normally goes, and you will repeat after me. Her intent began to expand out and became louder, reaching out towards the masses in the distance. Who here wishes to test their dominium and come under my banner as a knight? Woo! Bursts of golden dignity rose from her as her intent weaved out. And moments later, multiple men came forward and kneeled by the dozens as Sanctus Princess Emiliana looked at them closely, her fingers tapping out towards 3, as she chose 2 Teleo stage entities and 1 at the Sequor stage. You 3, come forward. She then turned towards Noah and Sanctus Princess Sona, who shook her head as if she had seen this too many times and did not need to see it again. Observe the test of Sanctum Knighthood and what it takes to be verified. Chapter 30:12, Osmont's Proof of Dignity. 2. The Test of Sanctum Knighthood. Within the Sanctum of Dignity, this test was closely related to this concept itself, as one was tested on the compatibility of dignity with their very existence, along with the potential of their existence with the Sanctus Populi, and revealing whether any harmful intents existing within one's dominium against the Sanctus Populi. The crux of it was a Sanctus Princess participating as they already held high prestige with the existential extremity authority of dignity, and they could see if there was any resonance between them and those taking the test of knighthood. As if to express this, the figure of Sanctus Princess Emiliana rose high above the arena, her hands waving upwards to reveal a massive clear gold mirror that reflected the surface below, an existential armament that uncovered any veiled intent against the Sanctus Populi. She then looked at the three entities she had chosen below as she called out, "A test of one's existence, a test of one's character, a test of knighthood. Come, hum!" Along with her words, the mirror above her fluctuated as her own body released tremendous waves of dignity, golden light beginning to form below her feet as it constructed a set of stellar gold stairs. And these stairs continued to form downwards towards the trainee knights below, forming a staircase of 1,000 massive stairs that vibrated with an astounding sense of dignity. Looking down, Emiliana called out again, "A set of stairs. Those with a high level of dignity may be capable of climbing a tenth of such stairs, and even this was enough to allow one to be a dragon knight. To have an equivalent potential of dignity that was a tenth of a Sanctus princess was already an astounding feat, since Sanctus princesses were those with extremely high dignity." With hardened expressions, the weavings of golden dignity erupted around the three chosen trainee knights as they began their ascent. Their dominiums erupted with every ounce of their potential. Their weavings of extremes coalesced around them to push them higher. But most of all, a profound sense of dignity rose from their bodies as quickly all three scaled 50 steps. Then, the pacing began to slow. One trainee dragon knight took the lead. It was a man with a bald head and golden goatee, dignity surging around him and painting his fair bald head golden. He took wide strides to cross 100 steps, and only began to slow down as he neared the 150th step. At this junction, he could go no further, even as veins began to rise below his skin, his dominium origin sending out waves of existential authority to no avail. He stopped at the 150th step. His dignity could only match up to 15th percent of Sanctus Princess Emiliana. But even this was astounding as the other two. One stopped short of 100 steps as the Sikwar stage entity could even cross past the 90th. Their bodies then reflected a unique light as a great deal of information about them was reflected in the eyes of Emiliana, her voice echoing out soon after towards the trainee dragon knight that had reached the 150th step. "Arise, dragon knight Reishi!" Glorious hymns played as the golden stairs disappeared. Waves of dignity surged as from the three, only a single knight was chosen. His expression showed tremendous joy and pride as he nearly took on his draconic form, brilliance shimmering on his body as he kneeled. There were other parts of the ritual that still remained, but Emiliana looked towards Sona as if she had shown the way, her figure descending as she nodded lightly. "Go ahead, little sister." Without batting an eye, Sanctum Princess Sona began to rise up, countless weavings of existence and extremes that others couldn't even fathom surging within her, as her thoughts were her own. When she reached a high enough point, she gazed down as she once more, and with actuality, locked onto Noah's figure. The top buttons of his white dress shirt were loose, as his muscular visage seemed about ready to rip the shirt off, his obsidian pants glimmering with brilliance as he gazed up towards her with unbound regality. It was only when those in the surroundings really took this scene in did this reality begin to settle in. A new entrant into their sanctum of dignity was undergoing his sanctum knighthood, and the one to take the lead on it was none other than Sanctus Princess Sona. This was a deadly blow as they wondered if this new entity had offended Sanctus Princess Emiliana for her to suggest this, or if there was something else they didn't know about. And truly, not many knew the workings behind the scenes. Emiliana wanted to confirm the aura she felt briefly from Noah, that she only ever felt from Elder Queens. And the terrifying entity above was simply thrust into this situation, as her goals were something others may never understand. But the case remained the same when it came to this knighthood. Wasn't he being set up for failure? When it came to dignity, none were higher than Sanctus Princess Sona. She had almost wrestled control of the source of dignity from the Elder Queen Mother just the day she was born. Climbing up towards her dignity? It was hard to truly say, since unlike other Sanctus princesses, she had never undergone a test of knighthood. But they could already see the weavings of what was about to happen. Far above, the figure of Sanctus Princess Sona gazed down towards Noah's utterly stable figure, her apathetic eyes gaining a sense of light once more, as she saw the weaving that confused her before she was distracted. She focused on it now as around her, threads of dignity began to rise. Threads. And yet the moment they emanated out, the statues of the 9 dragons in the surroundings began to tremble. The dominiums of Teleos staged dragon knights that had long since undergone their knighthood began to tremble with a sense of oppression. This was unquestionable and unbound, dignity just beginning to rise in thin threads. Chapter 3013, Osmont's Proof of Dignity. A theory. At this moment, it was as if even the statues of the 9 dragons were paying attention to her. All eyes were on her and her calm visage as she radiated an unbounded sense of dignity. Many Sanctus Knights had believed they knew and understood a fair bit about the abstruse and mysterious Sanctus Princess Sona who lived within their sanctum of dignity. Today, they found out that they merely held a glimpse. Along with the thick tendrils of dignity she released, a stellar set of stairs began to unfurl below her feet, as they were exquisite in nature. They didn't seem illusory, with each one being more massive than the last as to scale them. Oh, Sanctus Princess Sona replicated what Emiliana did, and in such a shockingly grand fashion as within a short instant, 1,000 luxurious golden steps inlaid with heavy dignity formed, all the way to the feet of none other than Noah. One entity above, one entity below. The Sanctus Princess Sona gazed at this unfolding reality with a mixture of apathy and calmness, her golden blue pupils now starting at Noah. There was something about him she couldn't put her finger on, something on the edge of lips, and yet she couldn't quite grasp it. It was an interesting weaving, and it was one of the reasons she went along with Emiliana's ruse. Now she gazed at the man below her. Was an interesting weaving it, or was there more? Her eyes were clear. She neither favored nor hated the man before her as she spoke lightly. Express your dignity. Express your dignity. The first words that Sanctus Princess Sona utilized to address the Weaver of Extremity. Following the ritual of knighthood, Noah needs to now take these steps towards the Sanctus Princess to express just how his dignity compared to hers, to test the potential he had on himself and towards the Sanctus Populi. But he was Noah Osmont. He now stood at the bottom of stairs as truly was he someone who had to climb stairs for others? In his body, deeply entrenched tyranny began to rouse and pulse as tendrils of purple light around his body. The weavings of what made him denied such an action. His selfishness, his tyranny, his quintessence, his standing as the protagonist. The surroundings began to buzz as they saw the new one not take a single step. His dominium instead beginning to give off a sense of unique pressure that they couldn't quite put a finger on. Sanctus Princess Emiliana watched closely. Sanctus Princess Sona raised her brows above as a light began to shine from the depths of the blue and gold. She could sense his defiance. She could sense a unique weaving rising within him that seemed to be so deeply filled with dignity, even though it seemed this being had not fully expanded and flowed into the intricate weavings of this concept yet. This caused the apathy in her eyes to fade as a bit more light shone through. How could someone express this unique sense of dignity even before they deeply delved into the weavings of its extreme? Could there be something here? A light of interest had only just begun to increase within Sanctus Princess Sona when she saw the right foot of this entity below her rise. And the light of interest instantly faded. It seemed that there was nothing new here. He, just like all the others, did not even know what he didn't know. Sona was about to close her eyes when she and all others saw the astounding scene of the visage of Noah not taking a step forward, but him simply bringing his foot down right where he was, as this single action seemed to carry great weight and moment. At the same time, his intent weaved out as it caused many gazes to change. My dignity is not something that can be measured in such a manner. Who was he? The 9th Infernal Lord, the true Emperor of Quintessence, the Weaver of Extremity. He was Noah Osmont. Boom! The instant his foot came down, the stairs built from an astounding sense of dignity vibrated as starting with the one directly in front of Noah, it began to rise. It rose along with his figure. After the first stair, the ones following it also began to rise. as his body was emanating a profound sense of magnetism towards the very makeup of dignity on these stairs. Your very existence is immeasurably compatible with the extremity of dignity. Your foundation supports it. Your dominiums exude it. Your extremes, records, and very existence emanated it. Your existence is grasping the existential extremity of dignity directly as an existential authority. He didn't expand the concept to extremity, but when he attained the effect of dignity, it was as an existential extremity authority. What could express dignity more than this? What could show a glimpse of the unfathomable dignity that his existence held, if not this? Illustrious golden light erupted from him amidst the tyrannical purple, tendrils of cerulean waves of infinity mixing in as each one held its own weavings of dignity. A colorless light of quintessence spread as what else could be as dignified as it. Every part of him seemed to show and express dignity, as the stairs that were descending all began to change from his end, rising along with him as they now formed a semilunar curvature. Those watching were first astonished, and when his intent truly settled in, a sense of stifling anger arose. But they could do nothing except watch as horrendously massive waves of dignity erupted from Noah like serpents. And as if they were sentient, they grabbed onto the stairs and hoisted it upwards until the semilunar shape began to straighten out. Until in a shocking expression of reality, the 1,000 stairs showed no descent as they became supremely flat, as if it were a walkway. Then the astounding visage of the weaver of extremity releasing serpentine tendrils of dignity all around stepped on this golden path, his arms stretched out as if he were sending a challenge as his intent weaved out. Express your dignity. The weaver of extremity spoke such words towards the Sanctus Princess Sona, his figure walking forward as his momentum rose boundlessly. Chapter 30:14, Osmont's Proof of Dignity. Before. Her existence was a unique one. She wasn't apathetic to everything because she thought herself above others. She didn't participate in the workings and rituals of the Sanctus Populi, not because she couldn't be bothered to, but because she had seen thighs others simply couldn't fathom. The day she was born, she felt such immense pain that in trying to eliminate it, she nearly stripped away the source of the most powerful existential extremity authority in the domain she was in. She saw too many things as on the Elder Queen Mother, on the Elder Queens, on the Sanctus Princess. All those she came across, their dominiums were marked with an unbearably heavy darkness of oblivion and damnation. They were all marked for destruction. Bearing such knowledge the day she was born was a weight others couldn't even fathom, but it was her first years of life when she moved madly to prevent this fate, grasping weavings others couldn't even think of, connecting even to omniversal authorities. Even with all of this, she found that nothing changed. She looked further ahead. She saw some possibilities of people like her, those referred to as blessed by the omniverse, those known as omniversal anomalies. She theorized weavings of existence with such entities included, and tried to foresee far into the eons to come, but nothing changed. Thus, she grew despondent. She had all this power. She had capabilities that this sanctum of dignity didn't even know half of. And yet even with all of this power, she was essentially powerless. No matter how much she tried to change things, it didn't matter. So what use was all this power? It grew to the point that she even stopped annealing her dominium and let it be. Whether she remained in the teleos stage or terracosm stage or further above, nothing changed. So why bother? This was the reason for her nonchalant and apathetic demeanor as to the Elder Queens. This was an affront to her blessings and power as they wanted her to do something, not knowing she had tirelessly tried to do many things for them to no avail. And now here she was, doing something, a process of knighthood. The light of apathy in her eyes was gradually drowned out by a light of interest the moment her expectations were defied. The moment this being made it clear he would not climb up. He instead forcibly altered the weavings of dignity she had laid down and made a pathway from the descending stairs. Dignity that Sona could see he was expressing for the first time truly. And when he began walking towards her grandly, as his intent told her to express her own dignity, she finally understood something. She finally realized what the thing she just couldn't put her thoughts on. the thing that caused her confusion when she first saw him. All entities she looked at across this dominium and those she studied the weavings of outside of it had a darkness, a shadow of damnation. She had seen it so much all of her life that she had actually blanked out when she saw a being that didn't have this shadow. Yes, he didn't have the shadow of damnation. Such a reality could mean many things as the moment she ascertained it. Boom. Her figure flung forward with horrific speed and power across the golden path of dignity. Boom! From her body, solidified waves of golden dignity erupted out in shock waves that spread all around, the figures of Sanctus Knights feeling their dominiums shuddering as they were flung back. Only Sanctus Princess Emiliana and Dragon Knight Alder were among those nearby in this region, who remained still even as their gazes changed. In the distant space above the 9 dragon statues, the visage of the Elder Queen Ariana that had just left reappeared. Her gaze stern as moments later, other Elder Queens began to appear beside her. All entities at the Terracosm stage of existential dominion realm. One was shrouded in a purple light as she gazed down while her intent moved calmly. That child actually did something for a change? The weaving was only meant for the Elder Queens who had come to observe the shocking fluctuations they felt. And yet wondrously, far down on the golden path of dignity, Sona heard the whispers of these intents easily as she felt all sources of dominiums nearby. Yes, she was doing something for a change. Because she had to confirm. She had to see if this entity before her was an entirely new omniversal anomaly she hadn't come across before, and whether anything would change with the weavings she had seen before if he was incorporated. The first test she sent out was uniquely still a test of dignity. Any anomaly had to have an extremely high value, as this entity before her had to be distinguished from a common existence to an uncommon one. And as Teleos stage entities in the surroundings were knocked back from the shockwaves of pure dignity she released, Ho! The bustling visage of the entity opposite to Sona continued on the golden path of dignity, as if the shockwaves weren't even felt by him. It didn't mean he was more powerful than Teleos stage entities. It only meant that when it came to dignity, he far surpassed such beings. Good. The light in Sona's eyes began to shine even brighter. She had shot forth with such blinding speed that she reached the halfway mark of the golden path of dignity. And the entity opposite to her had also reached the halfway point as they came inches away from each other, their dignity buzzing and warping the surrounding space as it felt like 2 fields were trying to establish their rulership. Around her, shock waves of dignity burst constantly as from the entity opposite to her, snake-like tendrils of dignity supported by royal purple and colorless lights raged madly. Some of these tendrils even beginning to form a throne behind him as if to show off his majesty. She looked at this being closely, and he seemed to be looking at her closely. Sensing the deep waves and reserves of dignity before her, she nodded to affirm that he at the very least had passed this benchmark, her eyes grasping as much of his weavings as she could as her intent weaved out. The name is Sona. You are? The weavings within this intent were simple, and the one she asked pulsed with brilliance as he replied just as simply. Osman, Noah. Behind him, unfathomable reserves of dignity raged as Sona looked at them calmly while nodding, her next words being anything but simple. Osman, do you want to join an initiative? A question. A question about something that no Elder Queens or Sanctus Princesses would even understand. This was the result of Noah's dignity being tested, as around the 2 of them who were nonchalantly clashing with heavy waves of dignity, Dragon Knights, Sanctus Princesses, and distant Elder Queens were gazing with calculative eyes carrying varying levels of shock. Chapter 30:15. The Initiative. 1. Too many things worthy of note occurred. One was the fact the new entrant actually had such shocking levels of dignity to the extent it seemed to match someone as terrifying as Sanctus Princess Sona. The other was, of course, the expression of dignity from Sona herself, which only further amplified the shock regarding the being she faced. The ritual of knighthood was flipped over. The stairs were never ascended. The whole test of dignity was changed. And as the 2 came face to face, their dignity pulsed and emanated off of each other as all existence around them trembled. At that moment, the Elder Queens in the far distance reacted and moved. Who was this new entity? How could his dignity match someone who nearly wrestled the source of dignity away from the Elder Queen Mother? This had to be ascertained first and foremost. Yet the moment they began to move, the eyes of Sona flickered as she turned to gaze towards their direction, feeling like something critical was about to be sidetracked. Her intent weaved out calmly as a unique power erupted from her, forming into an icy blue bubble in this region. Let's filter out what isn't important first. She didn't care for the rituals or what reaction those within the sanctum of dignity would have towards what had just occurred, and she needed to truly understand this being before her if the reality she had affirmed over and over again could change. So she let him know of her intent. And the icy bubble enveloped everything around them with a speed even Terracosm stage entities wouldn't easily grasp. And pop! With a flash of blue light, they disappeared. Sanctus Princess Emiliana was astounded. Elder Queen Ariana arrived on the walkway that now began to crumble along with a few other Elder Queens, her body trembling with visible anger as she couldn't sense Sona and the newly appearing entity with any of her weavings, her capabilities showing they far outstripped hers. Her bellow of anger was the only thing that reverberated out as a proof of one's Digbald. Turned out to be something far more than anyone imagined. A moment after her eruption of anger, Elder Queen Ariana turned her blazing gold eyes towards the figure of Sanctus Princess Emiliana sharply. The moment the icy blue bubble popped, the figures of two entities disappeared from the sanctum of dignity that was contained with the source of an existential extremity authority. And they actually went towards the source of another existential extremity authority. Being capable of containing immense amounts of existence within the source of a concept showed how far along one was, with the prerequisite being someone powerful enough at the Terracosm stage of existential Dominium realm. Yet Sona defied this once more, as they warped across existence and extremes to arrive at a new place. All around, an icy blue expanse could be seen as stellar freezing galaxies rotated above and below, an immeasurably icy coldness spreading into one's dominium naturally, as they may feel a biting cold if they couldn't withstand it. This was within the source of one of her main existential extremes, the source of the existential extremity authority of Psychros. Her gaze was studying the weavings of many things as she turned to really look at the being she had brought here after asking him about joining her initiative. An initiative to stop what she could already see with her own eyes since eons ago. It wasn't some ridiculous apocalypse that she saw the weavings of. The Omniverse was existentially stable, its workings too pristine for others to even fathom as a possibility of destruction, for it was truly an impossibility. It was them, the Sanctus Populi, others. The shadow of damnation covered them as this seemed to be their omniversal fate, one that she couldn't even begin to change. If she were to truly succeed, she would need to have enough power to do so. If she wasn't enough, there would have to be others. Now, if there was someone who didn't even have this shadow of damnation on them, then she simply had to attain his services among others. She may actually begin to follow the past weavings she foresaw, and look for other anomalies, other entities that may hold a similar uniqueness to her. This was the initiative, her initiative. But first, Noah Osmond, you seem to freely be doing whatever you want. His voice echoed out as he moved around the source of Psychros freely, as if its coldness didn't even have the chance to permeate into his existence. Sona looked at this scene as she nodded with a reply. Yes, when you know what I know, you have to move as you wish. Otherwise, you get bogged down by unnecessary things easily. As she spoke, she looked at him up and down as if he were some interesting case study, nodding her head here and there as Noah raised his brows at such a demeanor. Sona then stopped doing such actions and started straight at Noah, her icy gold blue eyes seemingly calculating the best way to move forward with this being, as after a while, she continued. I asked you about joining an initiative, but that may have been too many steps forward. You'll need some background, but the extent of it is that for a great deal of time now I've glanced at the weavings of those like me, those like you, entities with some sort of pull with the Omniverse. I did so in order to change something unfavorable that is coming, but none of the theorized weavings have been successful, so hold on. Before she continued any further, Noah stopped her with a sigh as he asked with a sense of doubt. Don't tell me it's another apocalypse, the omniverse about to end and all that. His words caused the eyes of Sona to twitch as she shook her head in denial. No, the omniverse is far too stable, something that very few can even comprehend. But it is an unchangeable path of damnation that I've seen for the Sanctus Populi. Her words were calm, even though she talked about such grave issues. But not just them. The Imperium, the Omniversal Pillagers. Chapter 3016, The Initiative, 2. Her words were shocking ones. She included the Sanctus Populi, the Imperium, and the Omniversal Pillagers, all in one. I sense the weavings of damnation on all of them without fail, and no matter what weavings I try to carry out, nothing can be changed so far. And thus, I came up with the idea of an initiative. An idea to create a force strong enough to overcome whatever it is that is set to bring damnation to all forces indiscriminately. Though even with that idea, nothing has come of it as of right now. And yet on this day, I meet someone that, unlike all of those I have seen and peered into, you do not carry the mark of damnation. Your demise is not a thing that has been set in stone. So naturally, you may be a critical piece that may finally change the results of the millions of possible weavings I've discerned so far. Thus, I asked you to join my initiative. After speaking this far, she silently stared at Noah, as if she were waiting for him to take it all in. And yet, he didn't show her much of a reaction of shock or concern, even when she told him of such shocking things. Seeing this unfolding reality, the fair visage of Sona actually smiled with satisfaction while continuing. Good, you're the pragmatic type, likely wondering what you can obtain out of even a situation like this. I like that better than if you had been someone with a sense of righteousness, who directly jumps into saying they will do what they can to save everyone. So what could an omniversal anomaly like you want? Her eyes pulsed with liquefied waves of dignity. She waved her hands to reveal golden circles of light all around her that showed different things within them, her intent pointing to each one. Various undiscovered and unexplored unique existential domains that will have their dangers, yes, but also their boons. She pointed towards multiple circles of golden lights that showed different locations across the Omniverse, untouched by others and bustling with unknown wonders. A terracosm license for the existential Imperium exchange, a carapace of an existential pillager, or bundles of unique fruits of existence. You can take your pick. The golden circles around her rotated like treasured circles of lights, as among all of them, there was one blinding one that was clear and transparent. It didn't show anything. She brought such a circle to float behind her, as in an instant it was her face reflected in it. Even that may be possible for you to attain, depending on how the weavings unfold. On that treasured circle of light, there was only her reflection. Noah looked at this with a smile as his intent weaved out. You would even put yourself as a prize I would want? Are you planning on offering yourself to every anomaly you come across in order to get them to join your initiative? His words were sharp as Sanctus Princess Sona shook her head as if expecting them. Across the Omniverse, many things vary and change, but the nature of a man remains the same. In the very depths of your drive for power and wonders, there lies a deep desire to dominate the most beautiful things in the Omniverse. A weapon, an extreme, a record, a woman. Such a desire is even more intense in men who stand out amongst others. Thus, I know this method may work for you. And among the many beautiful things out there, very few surpass me. She spoke such brazen words with utmost confidence that any common being would be left dumbfounded. And as for offering myself as a prize for others, just that question there shows your need for possessiveness. To have something be yours and yours alone. Regarding that, I've already discerned which methodologies I need to utilize to attain the services of other anomalies and bring them into the fold. Whether they stem from the Omniversal Pillagers, Sanctus Populi, or the Imperium. A mighty confident Sanctus Princess voiced out. And Noah blinked at her before replying with sharp eyes. Who's to say that you are something I consider an ultimate prize? I have many partners that I can confidently say are no less than you. a challenging light arose, and the dazzling figure of Sanctus Princess Sona placed her hand on her lips as she laughed genuinely for the first time, as if this laugh alone answered the question regarding whether she was an ultimate prize. "Look at me," she pointed to herself, her gorgeous visage, her dazzling existence, her icy gold aura. "No, really, look at me. Past the extremes, look at this." Her body began to buzz in a shocking manner as the existence surrounding them began to bend and distort around her. The space within the source of Psychros was seemingly bending to her will, as she wasn't using any existential authorities to cause such actions. She was pulling on the weavings of the Omniverse itself. What Terracosm stage entities begin touching on. What I began to touch upon days after I was born. Omniversal authorities, something that many only hear about but cannot grasp. I can also lead you towards that, as yes, I am the ultimate prize. Her level of confidence was utterly astounding to the extent that within Noah's mind, the extremity of tyranny appreciates the nature of the entity before you. The extremity of cheats states that she seems broken enough. The extremity of the protagonist sneers and states that she needs to know her place as an extra in his fable, that the weaver of extremity cannot just come under someone else's fold. The extremity of extremity questions whether this being is merely an extra. The weavings of his extremes were also jumping on board with their own opinion, as Noah took a moment to lock his gaze with the incredulous being before him, his intent weaving out moments later as he thought of the subject of omniversal authorities. "You have my attention." Chapter 30:17. The Initiative. 3. She has his attention. When Sona heard this, she nodded calmly as in the next moment she proceeded to sit down where she stood. Around her, intense weavings erupted out as she began to do something very few would understand. I have to get a glimpse of the weavings of future possibilities with you in the picture. While I do so, can you entertain me with more information about yourself? From her small figure, a blazing golden light shot up with this source of Psychros and melded with the surrounding space itself, melded with the very omniverse. With her gorgeous figure bathed in such a shocking light, she closed her eyes while still speaking to Noah. For you to not have a mark of damnation that even entities far stronger than you across the omniverse have, it must mean you have something far outside the scope of what many would imagine. Something that would routinely cause others to be shocked or in denial. Of course, this is your big secret, so I won't peer directly into it, but I'm curious about it since it should greatly affect things from here on out. Her eyes were closed as she did something profound, her dominium soul buzzing with existential authority as she continued. So, what could it be? I'm open-minded. I won't suddenly start convulsing in shock and stutter while telling you how impossible what you have is. Nor can I steal or try to make it mine. It's nearly impossible to steal the omniversal fortune of others. She stated that she wouldn't suddenly break down frothing at the mouth just when Noah stated what his power was. At such an idea, Noah shook his head while responding. What if I don't feel comfortable telling you such sensitive information? Then I'll tell you about some of the omniversal anomalies we need to recruit, and you can compare yourself with them. Her reply was sharp, even though she was multitasking. Our first target for the initiative is actually a pair twins from the Imperium. A brother and sister whose dominiums are linked in such a way that even if you cut one of them up entirely, they would regenerate everything. So long as one of them among the pair is alive and well, two of them uniquely have omniversal magnetic pieces, giving them a semblance of omniversal authority, as they have already begun to sense the vibrations of the string-like unit structure. Another is an omniversal trilogy that thrives on powering extremes records in existence. To an extent, we can gain the power of the ones powers right away, along with all of those. This is a tricky one to get, as I'll have to cross existential barriers even more. Then, there is, the words came to a stop. The dazzling S on her forehead shone brightly as the golden beam of light emanating from her and into the space above receded into her body, and she opened her eyes while blinking with utterly profound light. She then looked at Noah silently. She was multitasking. She had